Chapter 734. When they met in the restaurant the next morning, everyone looked at Fang Yan with strange eyes. Only Fang Yan knew that he was no different from yesterday. The ugly virginity hat was still on his head. Yi Ro didn't like shopping, but she liked to go shopping with Fang Yan. In other words, as long as she was with Fang Yan, she was willing to do anything. Even if they didn't do anything, it was a sweet joy to just look at each other quietly. Yi Ro knew how to drive, so she drove Fang Yan's refurbished and painted antique Hongqi car back to Swallow Dock. Yezi had to stay in Yanjing to study, and there was still more than a month before the final exam. Before that, she couldn't skip classes and run to Swallow Dock. The Yi family attached great importance to studies and the education of their children. Yi Daoling wouldn't allow his baby daughter to be mediocre in both literature and martial arts and could only rely on him to make a living. Of course, such things were not uncommon among the powerful. Fang Yan didn't go back with Yi Ro because he had other things to do in Yanjing. When he was having breakfast with Yi Ro and Yezi, he received a call from Zhang Jianjun. He asked about Fang Yan's whereabouts and said that a car would pick him up later. Fang Yan said the name of the elegant place, and Zhang Jianjun said with a smile that he knew where it was. He asked Fang Yan to wait in the club and a car would pick him up later. It wasn't until the afternoon that Fang Yan's phone rang again. It was a woman named Qing Yao who called. She said that she was ordered to pick up Fang Yan to the headquarters. "Where is the headquarters?" Fang Yan asked aloud. "You'll know when you get there." Qing Yao was very tight-lipped and her tone was very impatient. She said, "The car is waiting for you at the entrance of the club." She said the car, not she. It seemed that there was a hidden hostility to Fang Yan in her words. This made Fang Yan a little puzzled. When did he offend this bird? Puzzled, Fang Yan still walked toward the entrance of the club. This was an appointment with Zhang Jianjun, and behind Zhang Jianjun stood the old man. Therefore, he could only comfort his slightly restless heart with the words, "The king of hell is easy to see, but the little devil is difficult to deal with." After all, even the old man had praised him, so why should he care about other people's attitudes? Swallow Dock had things they had to do. This was a tradition that had lasted for thousands of years. Why would he need to look at anyone's face? Fang Yan arrived at the parking lot in front of the clubhouse. A woman in black tights was leaning against the car and smoking. She had thick eyebrows, short hair, an oval face, and exquisite facial features. She could be considered a unique beauty. Seeing Fang Yan coming over, he didn't ask Fang Yan's name. He pinched the cigarette butt in his hand and said, "Let's go." After that, he opened the door of the passenger seat and jumped in. Fang Yan noticed a detail. She used 2 fingers to put out the burning cigarette butt and brought it directly to the car. She didn't have the habit of throwing cigarette butts around. This made Fang Yan have a slight favorable impression of her. There was a driver in the front and someone in the passenger seat, so Fang Yan opened the back door of the Buick and sat in. The driver started the car and rushed toward the Yanjing city. Because Fang Yan wanted to know where their headquarters was, he paid attention to the scenery outside along the way. He wanted to see if it was a place he was familiar with or a road he had walked before. The woman called Qing Yao also looked at Fang Yan through the rearview mirror from time to time, but she didn't stop Fang Yan's behavior. Obviously, she also knew that this kind of thing didn't need to be kept secret from Fang Yan. The car drove to the center of Yanjing City and finally drove to the entrance of a small island. Facing the heavily guarded gate, Qing Yao opened the window and handed over a black card. The person inside the gate swiped the black card on the computer, and a huge loan-to case immediately appeared on the computer screen. The guards immediately raised their hands to salute and respectfully returned the black card. They didn't even check the car to see if there were any suspicious people or suspicious items. Fang Yan sat quietly and didn't say a word, guessing the organization and identity of Qing Yao. The river bank and the central island were connected by a bridge. The car quickly rushed across the bridge, but it didn't enter the main gate. Instead, it went to a deeper area on the right. They passed through 2 more checkpoints, and each time the green bird simply handed over the black card and they were allowed to pass. The car stopped in a small parking lot and Qing Yao opened the door and got out. She didn't talk to Fang Yan, but just looked at Fang Yan with indifferent eyes outside the window. Fang Yan knew that he needed to get out of the car as well. Sure enough, as soon as he got out of the car, Qing Yao led the way in front without saying a word. The driver didn't follow them but drove the car away quickly. After passing through another stone archway, What entered his eyes was a series of small courtyards that were arranged in a picturesque disorder but not closely packed together. Fang Yan understood what this place was. The Mystery Department. He had long heard of the Mystery Department, and knew that it was a special organization within the Red Wall that specialized in the security of the country's leader. It was also an extremely hidden organization. These people were secretly responsible for the security of the country's leader, and also dealt with some powerful and destructive enemies and very difficult matters for the country. There were many talented people in the Mystery Department and there were many experts. He had once imagined what the Mystery Department would look like, but he didn't expect the headquarters of this organization to be openly exposed under the sun in the bushes. Of course, it was in the bushes under the sunlight of the Red Wall. Fang Yan carefully looked at the small buildings, thinking about what kind of people lived in these small buildings. Of course, what he was most concerned about was where Dragon God was. Logically speaking, the people of the outside world didn't know what kind of experts were in the Mystery Department. However, because the Fang family paid extreme attention to Dragon God, and Dragon God's reputation was too great. Therefore, not only the Fang family but other people in the Jianghu also knew that Dragon God had entered the Red Wall. It was just like how they knew that Azure Dragon had fallen in battle, and that Black Dragon had appeared and disappeared mysteriously. Qing Miao, who was walking in front, clearly felt the change in Fang Yan's mood. She turned around and looked at Fang Yan and shouted, "Don't look around." Fang Yan grinned and said, "I want to see what can you do." Despicable person. Qing Miao's eyes were filled with killing intent as she said coldly, "What's your relationship with Bai Xiu?" Fang Yan asked with a smile. "You." Surprise flashed in Qing Miao's eyes. She didn't know where she had exposed a flaw that would actually make this guy connect her with Bai Xiu. "Let me guess." Fang Yan's mouth had a hint of ridicule as he said, "Bai Xiu has entered the Red Wall before, and may even have carried out some difficult missions for the Mystery Department as an assessment. Perhaps you are Bai Xiu's partner in a mission. You, a woman, have not seen much of the world and have not come into contact with truly outstanding men. Naturally, you will be deceived by Bai Xiu, a pretty boy who is good at scheming. You like him and even love him. But this is the Mystery Department. You can only temporarily suppress your feelings in the bottom of your heart, thinking that one day you and Bai Xiu will have the chance to be together. As long as you can have more opportunities to be together, as long as he can obtain the position that he once could. Unexpectedly, Bai Xiu was killed by my sword. So you hate me. Is that so?" Qing Yao took a deep breath. Her eyes were cold and her face was gloomy. She said in a low voice, "You think too much. I know Bai Xiu, but he is only my comrade." "Is that really so?" Fang Yan sneered and said, "I can feel the frequency of your heartbeat. I can even hear the change of your qi when you take a deep breath. Bai Xiu is your Achilles heel, right?" "I don't know what you're talking about." "You should already know what Bai Xiu has done. Even the people above won't tolerate him." Fang Yan looked at Qing Yao with a smile and suddenly raised his voice and said, "If you don't want your feelings to be known by everyone, then you better respect me a little. You're slandering me, you don't have any evidence." "What evidence do I need?" Fang Yan said disdainfully. "Gong Sunqi and I are friends of life and death. If I tell him that you like Bai Xiu, do you think he will tell everyone?" Qing Miao's expression changed dramatically. She did not expect Fang Yan to be so despicable and shameless, and be able to use any means. She did not expect that Fang Yan actually knew Gong Sunqi and that the two of them were friends of life and death. No. Qing Miao's thoughts instantly became clear. Because Fang Yan suddenly mentioned Bai Xiu and guessed her love for Bai Xiu, she was caught off guard. However, she was a member of the Mystery Department after all, and had the experience of carrying out many missions. Whether it was IQ or experience, she was not bad, and her mental reaction was also much stronger than ordinary people. It was just a moment of confusion and then she returned to her normal level. She looked at Fang Yan with gritted teeth, and was almost deceived by this disgusting hooligan. "Fang Yan, don't try to trick me. Don't underestimate the Azure Dragon. You were injured by Mr. Dragon God, and your Fang family and the Dragon God bloodline have a death feud. Gong Sunqi is Mr. Dragon God's beloved disciple. How could he be your life and death brother?" Fang Yan shrugged indifferently and said, "You're right, Gong Sunqi apologized to me and wanted my forgiveness, but I rejected him. It doesn't matter if he's not qualified to be my life and death brother. Your feelings for Bai Xiu are a fact and you might even have some secret collusion. As long as I tell this to everyone I see, who do you think they will believe? I don't believe that when you two met back then, you were not noticed by someone with ulterior motives. Qing Yao's expression changed many times, and after a long time she suppressed the hostility in her heart and asked, "What do you want? Answer me a question." "What question?" "Which courtyard does the dragon god live in?" Qing Yao was shocked and said, "You want to challenge Mr. Dragon God?" "No." Fang Yan looked at Qing Yao as if she was an idiot and said, "We'll take a detour to avoid him." Chapter 735. The green bird knew that Fang Yan had a grudge with the divine dragon lineage. The divine dragon had been living among the people for decades, and the moment he entered the capital he challenged Azure Dragon, who was at the pinnacle of martial arts, to not underestimate his enemy. He won in one battle, and during the battle he severed Azure Dragon's tendons, causing his cultivation to be ruined. He became a cripple who treated alcohol as his life. With Azure Dragon's demise, the Fang family fell into dire straits. From the green bird's point of view, Fang Yan had 100,000 reasons to hate the divine dragon, but he also had 1,000,000 reasons to challenge the divine dragon. The divine dragon entering the Red Wall to become a consecrator of the mystic division was not a secret in the outside world. For Fang Yan to take the initiative to ask about the divine dragon yard's whereabouts, he naturally wanted to take the opportunity to challenge the divine dragon to avenge Azure Dragon and his family's humiliation. If not, how would he have the chance to meet the divine dragon himself? In Fang Yan's eyes, the green bird's question was really idiotic and ridiculous. "Please, do you think my intelligence is on the same level as yours?" Ignoring the responsibility and consequences of challenging a high-ranking consecrator within the Red Wall, just the risk of fighting the divine dragon alone was not something he could bear. It would be fine if he won, but if he lost, it was a question of whether he could survive. Even the old drunkard who had entered the heavenly Dao realm was not the divine dragon's match. His tendons had been severed by that perverted old thing. From this, it could be seen that the divine dragon was ruthless. He showed no mercy when it came to killing in battle. As the old saying went, "It's never too late for a gentleman to take revenge." Fang Yan was a gentleman. Fang Yan was in no hurry. 50 years later, when he mastered his divine powers and entered the pinnacle of the heavenly Dao realm, he would definitely trample that old bastard into mush. If 50 years wasn't enough, then 60 years. 60 years wasn't enough, then 70 years. Fang Yan was younger than the divine dragon, and there would be a day when the divine dragon would be reduced to mush. He firmly believed in this. Upon hearing Fang Yan's answer, the green bird looked at Fang Yan with even more contempt. She said, "I thought you were going to avenge your family in a fit of rage, but I never expected you to be a coward who only knows how to avoid and take detours." Fang Yan didn't care at all. He looked at the green bird indifferently and asked, "Can you defeat the divine dragon?" Mr. Dragon God has long entered the heavenly axiom realm and his skills are profound. How could I possibly be Mr. Dragon God's opponent? Qing Yao was extremely respectful when she mentioned the Dragon God's name. On one hand, it was because of the Dragon God's ability. He held a high position in the Xian division and was indeed highly respected. In addition, because of the hatred between the Dragon God and Fang Yan's enemies were naturally her friends. Then why don't you challenge the Dragon God? The day you defeat the Dragon God will be the day you become famous. Green Bird sneered and said, "You still want to fight when you can't win? Do you think I'm an idiot?" Fang Yan nodded his head seriously, but repeated Qing Yao's words and said, "You still want to fight when you can't win? Do you think I'm an idiot?" Qing Yao was furious and said, "I have no enmity with Mr. Dragon God, so I'm not in a hurry to challenge him. You have a deep hatred with the Dragon God. The elders in your family were hurt by the Dragon God. Now that you've met him, not only do you not seek revenge, but you're also afraid to move forward. For a man like you to exist in the Fang family, you deserve to fall." Fang Yan looked at Qing Yao with a smile and said, "You really want to see me challenge the Dragon God? That's your personal matter. What does it have to do with me? It's just that as a martial artist I can't stand cowards." Fang Yan picked up a stone from the ground and threw it at Qing Yao. He said, "Do we have enmity now? Why don't you take revenge on me? Do you think I don't dare to kill you?" Qing Yao clenched her fists and her eyes were filled with murderous intent. Dust rose up from where her feet were standing and scattered in all directions. That was because she began to accumulate strength in her feet. She could rise from the ground and give Fang Yan a killing blow at any time. Of course you don't dare. Fang Yan said with a smile. If you dare to make a move, I'll shout that you're going to kill me. The fact that you're Bai Xiu's girlfriend will be known to the world. Who's Bai Xiu's girlfriend? Qing Yao's eyes were about to spit fire. She forcefully suppressed the hostility in her heart and shouted, Fang Yan, don't slander me. You're angry. A proud smile appeared on Fang Yan's face. He said, do you feel that the world is dangerous now? Do you know that you can't speak up now? Do you know what it feels like to be wronged? Fang Yan's expression froze and he shouted angrily, Bai Xiu killed my father and repeatedly set up traps to kill me. In the end, I used all my strength to kill him. How did I offend you? Is it because when he wants to kill me I just lie there and let him kill me? Is that the only way to satisfy you? On what basis? It's all your words. Who would believe it? Who can testify? Fang Yan was so angry that he laughed at this woman who had fallen in love. He said, what does it have to do with me whether you believe it or not? Anyway, I've already killed Bai Xiu. Also, why should I prove anything to you? Who do you think you are? Fang Yan, if you can't kill me then don't cause trouble for yourself. Fang Yan stared at the woman disdainfully and said, do you know that whether it's a quarrel or a fight you're no match for me? Who's no match for whom? A cold and arrogant voice suddenly came from the dense forest beside them. Fang Yan and Qing Yao looked toward the dense forest at the same time. A young man dressed in black with a delicate face and a strong oppressive aura strode over. The man's eyes were piercingly cold, and there was not a trace of emotion on his face. He gave people a feeling that he was arrogant and difficult to tolerate. Gongsun Qi. Qing Yao whispered. Because of the divine dragon's illustrious reputation, almost no one in the Xian division dared to provoke him. The divine dragon's beloved disciple, the little divine dragon Gongsun Qi, was arrogant and rude. He never put his colleagues in his eyes. It was obvious that she feared and disliked Gongsun Qi. Fang Yan glanced at Qing Yao, then looked at Gongsun Qi who was walking over with a majestic gait and said with a smile, Brother Gongsun, I just told Qing Yao that we are life and death brothers. Gongsun Qi's gaze fell on Fang Yan's head and said, who's life and death brothers with you? Are you worthy? Qing Yao also said so. He said that you're not worthy of being my life and death brother. But I told him that I only look at fate when I make friends, not status or ability. You're just a pile of shit. As long as I find you pleasing to the eye, you're my life and death brother. Fang Yan. Gongsun Qi's gaze was like a knife. I didn't bring any money that day so I couldn't kill you with my palm. Are you forcing me to make a move? You speak as if you can beat me. Fang Yan said with a smile. Besides. Fang Yan pointed at Qing Yao and said, she was ordered to pick me up so she naturally has to protect me. If you dare to make a move on me, Qing Yao will kill you with one palm, Fang Yan. Qing Yao clenched her teeth and glared at Fang Yan. She had the urge to bite him to death. She really regretted it. Why did she provoke such a scoundrel? If she had known earlier, her attitude towards him would have been slightly better. Even if she had enmity, she couldn't let him find out. Why did she have to cause so much trouble for herself? What? Did I say something wrong? Fang Yan looked at Qing Yao and asked. You picked me up. If someone made a move on me and you didn't protect me, then it would be your dereliction of duty. I'm afraid it won't be easy to explain, right? Qing Yao knew that Fang Yan was difficult to deal with. She was far inferior to him in terms of eloquence, so she didn't want to waste any more time on the road. The young chief was still waiting for him at the Xian department. Thus she looked at Gongsun Qi and said, Gongsun Qi, the young chief wants to see Fang Yan. I'll bring him over now. Gongsun Qi stared at Fang Yan for a long time and finally said, I'll let you live for now. After saying this, his body suddenly became shorter. Only then did the clothes on his body start to flutter gently with the breeze, and the long hair on his head also danced in the wind. When he walked out of the dense forest, he came with the force of thunder. He indeed had the idea of killing Fang Yan with his palm. At that time he was like a sword that had been unsheathed. In the cool breeze his long hair didn't fly and his clothes didn't flutter. His entire body was surrounded by the energy around his body, forming a transparent vacuum. It was hard to see with the naked eye, but Fang Yan and Qing Yao could feel its existence. Now that it had given up on the decision to make a move, its body and clothes returned to their natural state. Look, you're also threatening me. Fang Yan sighed helplessly. Do you know that anyone who threatens me doesn't have a good ending? When I first came to Huaqing, the school's director threatened me. Then his son was sent to a labor camp. Then Jiang Zhulu, one of the 4 prodigies of Huaqing, threatened me and now he's in prison. Jiang Junling also threatened me. He was chased out of the Jiang family and became a wandering ghost. Now you're also threatening me. To be honest, I'm looking forward to your ending. Tell me, how do you want to die? Fang Yan. Gong Sun Chi's clothes straightened up again and the hair on his head froze again. His palm glowed with a red light, and he could unleash a powerful palm knife at any time. He hated Fang Yan to the core. He hated Fang Yan's stinky mouth to the core. I'm here, Fang Yan replied softly. Are you blind? Gong Sun Chi. Qing Miao hurriedly stood between the two of them. Fang Yan, that idiot, didn't care, but he had to consider the consequences of the battle between the two of them. The young chief wants to see Fang Yan. I'm going to take him there immediately. Gong Sun Chi's eyes shone brightly and he didn't hide his ability realm. He thought for a long time and could only reduce the force again. He stared coldly at Fang Yan and said, Today I'll let you win with your words, but someday I'll cut off your tongue to go with wine. Look, you're threatening me again. If I were you, I'd quickly shout auspicious emperor. Gong Sun Chi snorted coldly, turned around and walked toward a small courtyard on the side. Fang Yan looked at his tall and straight back and sighed softly in his heart. When would he be able to draw his sword and cut off the dragon god's head, the little dragon god Gong Sun Chi's head, Jiang Junling's head, and Song Zanyang's head and little Dick? Others could draw their swords in anger, but he could only be a lowly person in anger. It was just a battle of words. Even if he won, what was the point? What would he gain? Fang Yan thought about it seriously. At least he was happy in his heart. Well, as long as he was happy, it was worth it. Fang Yan thought in his heart. Qing Yao glanced at Fang Yan and once again led the way in front. When Fang Yan was about to leave behind her, a clear voice rang out. Old friend, I'm here to visit. How can I not see you? Chapter 736. Old friend, I'm here to visit. How can I not see you? His voice was clear and bright, and it didn't have any oppressive might or ruthless aura. It was calm and upright, and it was like a benevolent senior that saw a nephew he liked and issued a sincere invitation. The voice was clear, but he could not see who the speaker was or where he was. It traveled through space and time, but it still felt like it was right in front of him. Green Bird was shocked and stopped in her tracks. She whispered, It's Senior Dragon God. Without needing Green Bird's reminder, Fang Yan had already confirmed the identity of the speaker. He had never seen the Dragon God before, let alone heard a word or two from him. However, he was very sure that this person was the Dragon God. It was like an epiphany of telepathy or a long-awaited godhood. Dragon God. The immortal Dragon God had a tough life. Fang Yan's mouth was full of bitterness. Had he alarmed this old monster? Did he want to cut off his path of progress? Could it be that he dared to cut him down in front of everyone? Hearing the Dragon God's voice, Green Bird looked at Fang Yan with a mocking gaze. She smiled and said, Mr. Dragon God invited you to see him. Do you dare to see him? He didn't invite me. Fang Yan said. I don't have any elders who are his old friends. After Fang Yan finished speaking, he strode forward. Oh, he started running. Coward. Green Bird sneered. The Dragon God suddenly spoke. Fang Yan and Green Bird were not the only ones who were shocked. Gong Sun Chi, who was walking towards the courtyard, also heard the voice. He turned to look at Fang Yan's distant back and shouted, In this world, there are only a few people who can be called an old friend by Master. Green Dragon, don't underestimate enemy, is one of them. Fang Yan, the old friend junior that Master mentioned is you. I must not decline an elder's invitation. Green Dragon, don't underestimate enemy and your master have no relationship. I only have a deep-rooted hatred and the belief to defeat him. Fang Yan retorted as he ran. You little brat. The Dragon God's voice came again. No matter how far Fang Yan walked, that voice would always follow him like a shadow, as if it was right beside his ear. Azure Dragon, Mo underestimate is a heroic and outstanding genius. Even though you were defeated by me, you are still worthy of admiration. You don't even have the courage to see me, so how can you talk about revitalizing the Fang clan? How can you take revenge for Mo underestimate? Screech. Fang Yan lifted his foot and gently put it down. He stood there thinking for a moment, then turned around and walked back step by step. He walked slowly as if each step was difficult. However, his footsteps were smooth and did not slow down at all. Since he had already made his decision, there was nothing to regret. Not hesitating to fight. Not hesitating to die. Are you really going? This time, Green Bird couldn't understand Fang Yan. He had already run so far away, so why bother coming back? After all, the dragon god was not Gong Sun Chi. If Gong Sun Chi wanted to make a move on him, he could still stand in the middle and use the young chief to suppress him. However, if the dragon god made a move on him, who would dare to stop him? If he killed him with one slap, then even if the young chief had complaints, he probably wouldn't be able to say much, right? Fang Yan ignored Green Bird and walked straight to Gong Sun Chi, saying, "Lead the way." Gong Sun Chi looked at Fang Yan thoughtfully, thought for a moment and said, "If I were you, I would pretend not to hear it." As he spoke, he turned and walked towards the small courtyard. Fang Yan's expression was solemn as he followed behind Gong Sun Chi. Gong Sun Chi stopped at the door of a small courtyard, reached out and knocked on the door, saying, "Master, Fang Yan is here. Come in." The dragon god said aloud. Creak. Gong Sun Chi pushed the door open and entered. Fang Yan also lifted his foot and stepped into the small courtyard. Under the eaves of the courtyard's corridor, there was a round stone table. Beside the table were two oval stone chairs, and on one of the stone chairs sat a man in a black robe. The man's face was thin, his eyes were long and narrow, and his skin was white and smooth. He looked somewhat feminine. However, the light in his eyes was restrained and his hair was black and shiny. When he smiled, the wind blew, and when he did not smile, he exuded power. His eyes were slightly sunken and his lips were thin and cold. One look and one would think that this person was a sinister and ruthless person. At least that was what Fang Yan thought. In his hand was a teacup, and he was tasting the Wudong Mountain vanilla tea that he had just brewed. "Master." Gong Sun Chi walked to stand behind his master and then did not say a word. Fang Yan stood in the middle of the courtyard, sizing up the middle-aged man who was drinking tea. This man was one of the three dragons of Wuxia, the dragon god Tu Ming. He was the one who soared to the sky and knocked Mo Qingdi down from his pedestal. Even in the process of the battle, he did not hesitate to use a killing move and cut off the tendons of Mo Qingdi's hand, causing the azure dragon Mo Qingdi to become a cripple. In order to restore his pulse, he had no choice but to travel to the extremely cold lands to find the ice dragon. "Old drunkard," Fang Yan called softly in his heart. At this moment he was not afraid of the dragon god sitting in front of him. But he really missed the old drunkard who was far away in the foreign lands. They were his elder brother and master, and they were like his father to him. How was he now? Was he still alive? Fang Yan made up his mind. No matter what, he had to make a trip to the extremely cold lands. He had to bring the old drunkard back. No matter if he brought back a living person or a corpse, he had to bring him back to Swallow Dock, back to the Fang family. That was his home. Bulsh *T. Return home in glory or be buried in the snow country. Such words could be said casually, who would actually take them seriously? Even if he did not find the ice dragon, even if he could not restore his pulse, Mo Qingdi was still the hero in Fang Yan's heart. The dragon god gently blew on the leaves in the teacup, blowing away the tea leaves, and then gently took a sip. He blew again and then took another sip. After 3 consecutive sips, the cup of fragrant tea was finished, and he put down the teacup in his hand. The dragon god looked at Fang Yan, who was in a state of deep thought, and asked aloud, "You two must have a good relationship, right?" Only then did Fang Yan recover from his thoughts of Mo Qingdi. He looked at the dragon god with a fierce gaze and said, "Very good. Then you have a reason to hate me," the dragon god said. Fang Yan grinned and said, "You're telling the truth." "But so what?" the dragon god said bitterly. Mo Qingdi's meridians have been broken, and his cultivation has gone down the drain. I heard that the Fang family has a son, Fang Yan, who comprehended the heart of Tai Chi at a young age. He also sailed against the current, and obtained the blessing of the light of Tai Chi that is rarely seen in 100 years. After a pause, the dragon god said bitterly, "What a pity. The heart of Tai Chi has become a stillborn fetus. There is no wind, no force, and the martial art does not advance. Fang Yan, how are you going to take revenge?" In order to save Yi Ro's life, Fang Yan used the mountain moving technique to move the volcano into his body. After suffering such a heavy setback, Fang Yan's heart of Tai Chi became silent, and once again became a stillborn fetus. Fang Yan's physical state could not be hidden from a master like the Dragon God, who could see his current cultivation level at a glance. Fang Yan grinned and said, "Will you kill me now?" "Of course not," the Dragon God said with a smile. "How can you kill people at will in this red-walled courtyard? You see, you can't kill me now, so I can still leave your courtyard safely," Fang Yan said with a smile. "As long as you give me one more chance, I will have one more chance to kill you. Fang Yan, if you want to challenge my master, then defeat me first," Gong Sun Chi said fiercely. What kind of person was his master? Even a junior like Fang Yan dared to say that he would have one more chance to kill him. Did he think he was invisible? Fang Yan waved his hand and said to Gong Sun Chi, "My opponent is your master, you are not qualified." Fang Yan. Gong Sun Chi was furious and he struck with his palm. But a ginkgo tree next to Fang Yan suddenly collapsed, its branches and leaves flew, and the trunk burst as if it had been hit by a heavy object. Fang Yan stood where he was without moving. He did not dodge and he did not even show fear in his eyes. He looked at the Dragon God with a calm expression and said, "You see, you still don't dare to kill me. As long as I am alive, there is still a chance." Fang Yan. Gong Sun Chi wanted to strike again. All right. The Dragon God looked at his disciple with difficulty and said with a smile, "Can you really kill him here?" "Master, he has gone too far, I have to teach him a lesson." "Don't talk about it if you can do it, but do it if you say you will," the Dragon God admonished. Gong Sun Chi responded and stared at Fang Yan fiercely but did not say anything else. Master was right, he would not talk about it. When he had beaten Fang Yan to the ground and broken his arms and legs, then he would tell him that this was the consequence of offending him. The Dragon God's gaze was on Fang Yan and he said, "Is it good to underestimate the enemy? Whether he is good or not, you should know better than me, right?" Fang Yan said coldly. This kind of person was really hateful. When he broke the tendons in your arms and made you a useless person, he asked you with concern, asking you how have you been recently. This was not concern, this was a stab in the back. When one is at the peak, he seeks defeat alone. It is hard to find a friend in life, and it is also hard to find an opponent. Underestimate the enemy is able to be my enemy, and it is also my friend in life. The Dragon God sighed and said, "I heard that he went to the land of extreme coldness to find an ice dragon to reconnect his meridians. If he really found such a magical item, underestimate the enemy will be able to return to the peak, and I will have a close friend that I can spar with and travel the heavenly axiom with. To me, traveling with him is also a great joy in life." Fang Yan laughed and said, "I only know that the Dragon God has a high cultivation base, but I didn't expect you to be so thick-skinned. We are both walking the same path, and as a junior I really want to know, is your shamelessness innate or is it self-taught? Can you teach us juniors some lessons?" Impudent. Chapter 737. According to the ranking of the inner pugilistic world, Divine Dragon, who had long entered the heavenly Tao realm, could be considered a grandmaster of his generation. Although Fang Yan was young and talented with extraordinary achievements, he could only be considered a rookie in front of a peerless expert like Divine Dragon. A junior repeatedly ridiculing and belittling his seniors. This was not acceptable in any place. Gong Sun Chi was anxious to protect his master. After shouting, "Impudent," he leaped up and punched at Fang Yan. "Come back," Divine Dragon called out. Gong Sun Chi attacked with all his might and was extremely fast. Just as his fist was about to hit Fang Yan's chest, he heard his master shout for him to go back. His master's orders could not be disobeyed. He could still change his moves when he had used up all his strength. Boom! The fist passed by Fang Yan's face and hit the air with great force. A strong gust of wind slammed into Fang Yan's face. Gong Sun Chi's body flew backward in the air and landed lightly on the ground. He once again stood behind Divine Dragon. His face did not turn red nor did his heart skip a beat. It was as if nothing had happened. Fang Yan looked at him coldly, but he felt a tinge of regret. "Master, how can you let this kid be so arrogant in front of you?" Gong Sun Chi asked indignantly. Divine Dragon smiled faintly and looked at Fang Yan. "Do you know that you've been played by this kid?" "I don't know. I just want to help Master vent his anger." Gong Sun Chi looked at Fang Yan with a murderous look. He was already unhappy with this person and disliked his craziness. The last time they met he wanted to beat him up. If not for his lack of money, how could he have allowed him to be so arrogant? Now that he had repeatedly attacked and insulted his master as his disciple, he naturally had to step forward to relieve his master's boredom. "You idiot." Divine Dragon chuckled and said, "What is this place? How can you attack others as you please?" His provocation time and time again was nothing more than to provoke us, master and disciple, to take action against him, causing dissatisfaction within the Xian division and some of the higher-ups. I invited a guest but injured him. Is this how I treat a guest? What's more, this person was personally summoned by the young chief. Forgetting official duties for personal reasons was a huge crime. Besides, what do others think of me? Where do you think master is? He was the one who started it, Gong Sun Chi said indignantly. Who would believe a single statement? Green Bird can testify. The Divine Dragon shook his head and looked at Fong Yen saying, "Within the red wall, it is supposed to be quiet and peaceful, there should be no weapons. You managed to provoke Gong Sun Chi's anger with just a few words. You are rather quick-witted. However, have you ever thought that if I was the one who attacked just now, I'm afraid you would have lost your life with a single punch? Even if your backup plan is exquisite, so what?" Since his thoughts had been seen through, Fong Yen no longer played dumb and said, "Let's not talk about whether or not I can take a punch from the Divine Dragon. Even if I can't, I will just die. I am one of the best of the younger generation in Swallow Dock. Master just brought me to see the old chief and recommended me to be the new master of Swallow Dock. Now, when I am working hard for the country, I was killed and injured by you, master and disciple, because of your selfish thoughts. What does the old chief think of you? What does the young chief think of you? Also, although Swallow Dock doesn't have any heavenly path masters for the time being, they have many heroes. They probably won't allow their own family members to be bullied for no reason, right? The heroes of Swallow Dock didn't die in the hands of external enemies, but died in the hands of you, master and disciple. How will the country give Swallow Dock an explanation? Are you here to ruin my reputation? I don't know if you have a good reputation," Fong Yen said. Hearing this, Gong Sun Chi wanted to raise his knife and cut someone again. He was proud and arrogant and rarely took others seriously. But ever since he met this Fong Yen, why did he always have the urge to cut him with a knife every time he heard him say something? Fong Yen was indeed the most hateful person he had ever met in his life. Fong Yen ignored Gong Sun Chi's existence. He couldn't be bothered to argue with a brat. He looked at the Divine Dragon Tu Ming with a straight face and said, "I know I'm no match for you, and I've never thought of taking revenge for senior brother Imo Qingdi by cutting off one of your arms and one of your legs. However, I dare not forget this hatred. If senior brother Imo comes back, he will come and take your hands and feet. If senior brother Imo doesn't come back, I will come and take your hands and feet. I don't have to worry about the old master laughing at me when I say this in front of you." That was indeed what I was thinking. It is also the goal of my life. I also know that you hate both of us, although I do not know where this hatred comes from. After all, during the sparring match, it was you who ruthlessly severed Imo Qingdi's meridians and destroyed his cultivation. This is even more hateful and unacceptable than killing someone with a sword. You invited me to meet you in the courtyard, but my heart refused and I was afraid. Because I was worried that you would kill me without a second thought. But I still came in. I'm not doing this for my own reputation, but for Azure Dragon Imo Qingdi's reputation. I don't want others to say that Imo Qingdi has a cowardly junior brother who doesn't even have the courage to meet his senior brother's mortal enemy. And I don't want to hear this from your mouth. So I came in. I wanted to provoke you or your disciple Gong Sun Chi. I thought, as long as you and your disciple attack me, as long as I can escape from this courtyard, I will naturally have a way to ruin your reputation as a divine dragon. Of course, it doesn't matter even if I can't escape. If I am killed by you, I believe you will not be able to roam freely inside this red wall, right? There will always be people who will speak up for this, and there will always be people who will sympathize with an innocent dead person like me. This is the worst-case scenario. If this is the result, there is nothing I can't accept. I look forward to better things, but who asked my cultivation to not be as profound as yours? Reasonable and well-founded. The divine dragon's eyes lit up. He smiled and said, "Courageous and resourceful. And the rarest of all, affectionate and loyal." Qing Yao stood at the door, not daring to come in. Hearing the divine dragon's evaluation of Fong Yen, she opened her mouth wide in shock. The divine dragon looked kind and amiable, and did not have the slightest bit of arrogance when interacting with others. But everyone knew that his arrogance was hidden in his bones. He interacted with everyone, but he also looked down on everyone. But no one expected him to evaluate Fang Yan like this, using the word excellent 6 times to describe Fang Yan's excellence. This shameless hooligan, was he really that good? The muscles on Fang Yan's face twitched. He thought to himself, did I really use my talent to conquer this old man? Otherwise, why would he praise me so hard? I just want to live. I just want to live. Fang Yan said in a low voice. If you want to kill me, I can't stop you. I can only ask you for some small interest from my death. How is this considered courageous and resourceful? If I were a really smart person when you invited me into the courtyard to meet, I would have run away. The divine dragon laughed and pointed at Fang Yan. Running away is indeed the smartest choice. But as you said, if I invited you but you didn't come in, wouldn't people laugh at Mo Xiaodi for having such a junior brother? That's why I came. Fang Yan said. Now that we've met, if Elder Divine Dragon has nothing else to say, then I'll take my leave first. I don't dare to let the young chief wait too long. Have a cup of cold tea before you leave. The Divine Dragon said. Otherwise, it's my fault for not treating my guest well. He took out a brand new teacup, lifted the teapot and filled the cup with tea. Then with a flick of his finger, the teacup flew behind Fang Yan. Fang Yan dodged sideways and the teacup flew past him but crashed into him from the front. Fang Yan no longer dodged. He calmed his mind, gathered his qi in his right hand and reached out to catch the teacup. The teacup landed lightly in his hand and there was nothing strange. Just as Fang Yan was about to finish the tea in one gulp, the teacup suddenly exploded. Bang! The tea splashed everywhere. Fang Yan's face was covered with tea and a tea leaf was stuck on the bridge of his nose. Fang Yan turned around angrily and stared at the divine dragon with a murderous look. This was a humiliation. Gong Sun Chi laughed, pointed at Fang Yan's embarrassed look and said, Fang Yan, master only invited you to a cup of tea, why did you bite the teacup? The divine dragon looked at Fang Yan suspiciously and did not say a word, nor did he look proud. With his identity and status, this little trick couldn't increase his beauty. It was just a joke to test the waters. Fang Yan's face was dark, from red to purple to pale and then back to its natural color. Fang Yan cupped his fists and said calmly, Thank you, Mr. Divine Dragon, for the tea, it's delicious. Fang Yan wiped the tea stain on his face and the tea leaf on the bridge of his nose, and strode toward the door of the small courtyard. The green bird bowed slightly to the divine dragon, and then quickly left with Fang Yan. For some reason, seeing Fang Yan's appearance after being bullied, she did not dare to mock him. The divine dragon looked at Fang Yan's back as he left, his fingers tapping on the table lightly, and did not speak for a long time. Master, it's good to teach this arrogant boy a lesson so that he knows his place. Gong Sun Chi called out. The divine dragon did not respond and he did not send the guest off with tea to teach Fang Yan a lesson. He looked at the teacup in front of him and asked, Did the young chief also summon you to carry out a mission? Yes. Gong Sun Chi nodded. I heard that he wants me to carry out a mission with Fang Yan, and I was thinking of refusing. The divine dragon sighed softly and said, This boy is extremely dangerous, far more dangerous than the green dragon. Do not underestimate him and work with him at his peak, you must be careful. Gong Sun Chi was shocked. Chapter 738. Gong Sun Chi was born in the Luo River martial family, the Gong Sun family. He was also the disciple of the divine dragon, Ku Ming. His family was rich in knowledge and he was talented. He had achieved extraordinary accomplishments at a young age. It made him arrogant, believing that the heroes of the world were mediocre. Gong Sun Chi found it hard to accept that his master had praised Fang Yan and said, This person is extremely dangerous, far more dangerous than the Azure Dragon when he was at his peak. His master had also reminded him, when working with him he must be on his guard. Master, don't boost the morale of others and belittle your own. I admit that Fang Yan is a little clever, but you said that he is stronger than Emochingdi at his peak. I'm afraid that's not enough to convince your disciple. Emochingdi is a heavenly Dao realm expert. Before Master defeated him, he reigned supreme in the world and was almost invincible. Fang Yan originally relied on the heart of Taiji, but now, after Master's experiments, the heart of Taiji is dead. What's there to be afraid of at such a realm? It's fine if he doesn't provoke me, But if he dares to pull those annoying tricks in front of me, I'll draw my sword and slay him. Gongsun Qi truly hated Fang Yan this time. Fang Yan had provoked him time and time again in front of his master, but he was unable to humiliate him. Finally, his master had to take action personally. He felt extremely stifled, unable to vent his anger. Strength doesn't just refer to martial arts cultivation. Ku Ming knew his disciple's state of mind like the back of his hand. He said with a clear warning tone, "This kid is very scheming. He has the ability to kill invisibly while chatting. I'm not worried about you fighting him head-on. However, carrying out missions is fraught with peril. If he were to use extreme means on you during the mission, how are you to defend against it? He can make you panic with just a few words, and I'm afraid that his crafty plots and schemes are also impossible to guard against. He doesn't dare to fight me head-on and only knows how to use those underhanded tricks. I look down on such a person." Gongsun Qi sneered. "However, since Master finds him difficult to deal with, I will naturally be careful when carrying out missions. I don't want to fail miserably and become a laughing stock." "That's good." Ku Ming nodded. Gongsun Qi thought of something else and asked, "Master, did you send tea to Fang Yan to test Fang Yan?" With a puzzled expression, Lao Ming said softly, "This kid's realm is rather strange. His Tai Chi heart is clearly dead, but there's surging heat flowing in his body as if he's in a state of Qi deviation. Maybe he has a cold and a fever," Gongsun Qi said sarcastically. He was not afraid of Fang Yan at all. He was not afraid of Fang Yan who possessed the heart of Taiji, and he was not afraid of Fang Yan whose heart of Taiji had become a dead fetus. "I hope so." He gently tapped his fingers on the table, closed his eyes and pretended to sleep. After leaving the small divine dragon courtyard, Fang Yan's arms, which were hidden in his sleeves, trembled slightly. Just now he had been forcefully restraining himself, but now he could no longer bear it. The dragon god's kung fu was unfathomable. He had only used his finger to flick it lightly, and he had used all his strength to reach out to catch it, but he was still shaken to this extent by the teacup. Walking behind Fang Yan, Qing Miao noticed the strangeness of Fang Yan's arm, but she did not say anything. When Fang Yan spoke he felt hateful, but when Fang Yan was silent he felt afraid. When they reached a fork in the road, Fang Yan did not know the direction. Qing Miao quickly stepped forward and said to Fang Yan, "I'll lead the way." Looking at Qing Miao's graceful figure, Fang Yan followed her into a small red building. The small building was quiet and secluded and there were no signs of people. Qing Miao swiped the black card at the door of the small building, and the glass door immediately shrank to both sides. Walking forward there was another glass door. She swiped the card again and the glass door opened up. There was no trace of its existence. Qing Miao stopped at the door of the elevator. There were no buttons on the elevator. Qing Miao swiped the card on a red dot, and then a silver hole appeared on the wall. Qing Miao moved her eyes over to do a retinal scan, and then the elevator door opened with a ding sound. Qing Miao walked into the elevator and Fang Yan followed closely behind. The elevator whooshed downwards and after a few seconds it stopped. Dang! The elevator door opened and in front of them was a wide hall. There were many people practicing with equipment in the hall, and there were two men fighting fiercely in the ring. Fang Yan glanced over there and just happened to see a man with pigtails twisting the arm of a bald, strong man. Qing Miao did not take Fang Yan to the hall, but took him to a remote passage. At the door of a silver steel office, Qing Miao glanced at Fang Yan and said, "Wait a moment." Qing Miao knocked on the glass door and the glass door opened. Qing Miao stood at the door and made a standard military salute and said, "Chief, I've brought Fang Yan." "Invite Fang Yan in." A calm man's voice sounded. Qing Miao moved to the side and Fang Yan walked past her. The room was wide, but the decoration was extremely simple. There was a desk, an office chair and a computer on the desk. Behind it was a row of bookshelves with a few books on them. Other than that, there was nothing else in the room. Sitting on the office chair was a middle-aged man wearing glasses. He had a kind face and when he smiled it was like a spring breeze. Although it was the first time they met, Fang Yan was no stranger to this man, because he often saw this familiar face on TV. The man sat on the chair and looked at Fang Yan with a smile. He did not greet Fang Yan, nor did he say anything about taking a seat. Of course, there were no extra chairs in the room. After a long time the man finally said, "When I first met Underestimate he was as young as you. He was graceful and arrogant. At that time I joked that he was the most handsome man in our Xian division. Now that I see Fang Yan, I have the same feeling as when I met Underestimate. What an elegant and handsome young man. With the young chief praising him like this, Fang Yan could no longer remain silent. He respectfully bowed to the chief and said with a smile, "Thank you, chief. I'm not as good as senior. Each has his own merits." The young chief's gaze was always on Fang Yan's face and he said, "But the two of you are indeed a little different. At least in terms of character you're very different." When I praised him for underestimating the enemy, he gladly accepted it. "He's not as humble as you." Fang Yan smiled again and said, "That's why I'm not as good as senior." The young chief smiled and shook his head, saying, "Fang Yan, from the time you were born to the time you walked into this office, all your resume is in my computer. I've studied it for a long time and I have a certain understanding of you, right?" If someone else had said this, Fang Yan would not have believed it. But when this young chief said this to him, Fang Yan knew that there was not the slightest bit of exaggeration. If he wanted a person's information, it was just a matter of saying a word. "I hope I didn't disappoint the chief," Fang Yan said in a low voice. "This was not the time to make jokes. This was not the time to make jokes." "I'm not disappointed," the young chief said with a smile. He pushed away the chair and stood up, striding over to Fang Yan, sizing up Fang Yan, who was a head taller than him at a close distance, and said, "And you're far more outstanding than I imagined. Even more outstanding than Underestimate when he was young. Perhaps in the path of martial arts, Underestimate is more outstanding than you. But that's only because Underestimate is more diligent than you, and wholeheartedly devoted to the pursuit of martial arts. And you. Sometimes I'm really curious, what exactly is in your mind? The things you've experienced, the way you handle dangerous situations, it's really admirable." The young chief looked at Xianxia and said, "You already know where this place is, right?" "I know," Fang Yan said with a nod. "Xianxia has already introduced me to her on the way here. She's a very meticulous person. This is the Xian department. I've long heard of her great name, and my heart is still surging with excitement." Xianxia looked at Fang Yan gratefully. When the young chief asked that question, Xiao's heart almost jumped out. She was in charge of receiving people, so she had the responsibility to introduce related matters to him. But because she was full of hostility towards Fang Yan, she had been delaying this responsibility. Later, after entering the Red Wall, she met the Dragon God and his disciple, and this matter was delayed even more. She thought that according to Fang Yan's character, he would definitely say something bad about her in front of the young chief. Unexpectedly, not only did he not do that, but he even said a few good words for her. This man was really a strange fellow. "Yes, this is the Xian department," the young chief said. "I've been in charge of the work of the Xian department all these years, including the matters related to Swallow Dock. But Swallow Dock is a rather special existence, and many times we still need Comrade Nianyu to come forward and communicate. So, on behalf of the Xian department, I welcome you to join us." The Comrade Nianyu that the young chief mentioned was the old chief that Sir had brought Fang Yan to meet, because the old chief was mainly in charge of the work of the military. In fact, the nature of the work overlapped with the young chief in some aspects. Swallow Dock did not belong to the Xian department, and more often than not they worked closely with the military. And in some special matters they had to work together with the Xian department. Swallow Dock was under the dual leadership of the old chief and the young chief. Of course, it was in parallel with the military and the Xian department, and was an independent entity. The affairs inside were complicated, and even the current Fang Yan could not figure them out. "It's my honor. I also have to thank the chief for your help before, and Swallow Dock will remember it," Fang Yan said gratefully. The young chief naturally knew what Fang Yan was talking about and said, "Someone crossed the line, so of course we have to kick him back. But it's just a joke between kids, don't take it to heart." "Yes." Fang Yan agreed and pondered the meaning of the young chief's words. The young chief glanced at the time on his watch and asked in confusion, "Where's Gong Sun Chi? Didn't you inform him?" Gong Sun Chi had just had a conflict with him, so naturally he was unwilling to immediately follow behind him to meet the young chief. Hearing the young chief's question, Fang Yan pretended to be casual and said, "When I came over, I was even invited by Mr. Dragon God and Brother Gong Sun to the courtyard for tea. Brother Gong Sun should be here soon, right?" Green Bird's heart sank, but she did not look at Fang Yan's eyes. This guy killed people without leaving a trace. He really was not a good person. Chapter 739. The trees were tall and the shadows were eerie. Venomous snakes circled and ferocious beasts stood in great numbers. This was an oppressive primitive forest that made it hard for people to breathe. The river gurgled. A snow-white rabbit walked out from the grass. After looking around, it carefully walked to the river to drink water. It drank 2 mouthfuls and suddenly looked up as if it was frightened. It looked around again and didn't find anything suspicious. Then it lowered its head to drink water again. After drinking 2 mouthfuls, it raised its head again. The cycle repeated again and again. It looked extremely insecure. Whoosh! A snake as thick as a human leg came out of the river. It swallowed the white rabbit in one gulp. Walala, water splashed everywhere. Because it rushed too quickly, the snake's upper body was as tall as a person in the air. Its strength was exhausted. The snake's head fell. Then it slammed heavily into the river. The snake sank to the bottom of the river and disappeared. Only countless ripples were left on the surface of the river. Because of this incident, the forest was in chaos. The birds in the forest flew away and the bats jumped around. Some small animals hiding around the river ran away, knocking down leaves and branches. The scene was chaotic, but soon it was quiet again. The strong preyed on the weak and deceived each other. This was the main theme of this primitive forest where law and morality couldn't cover. Tranquility. A deathly tranquility. The trees were tall and large with lush leaves. They clustered together like an endless green umbrella, blocking the sun, moon, stars, and people's sight. Looking up, only a corner of the sky could be seen through the leaves. The sky was gray. It looked like it was about to rain. Whoosh whoosh whoosh. A group of black figures rushed over. Their footsteps were light and fast like lightning. The lake that was several meters wide was no problem for them. With a tap of their toes, they had already jumped from the east bank to the west. Tranquility. Once again, deathly tranquility was restored. Cha-cha-cha. A group of men in green camouflage carrying all kinds of high-tech weapons came over. Their movements weren't as agile as the men in black. When they ran, they made clanking sounds. Their speed wasn't as fast as the men in black. When they ran to the river, they carried their weapons and waded into the water. But this group was large in number. There were at least 30 to 40 people. Moreover, they had a clear division of labor and had great teamwork. Some were the vanguard, some were the cover, and some were the detectives looking for suspicious traces. They were silent. Other than the occasional command terms issued by the commander, they did not say anything else. They were cold-blooded killing machines. How could a machine talk? However, their eyes were filled with anger. The Millennium Palace was the most well-guarded place in the world. It was a palace that only gods could enter. However, 2 men in black had barged in and taken away the core secret of the Millennium Palace. To gods' protectors like them, this was an insult, a provocation, and something they could not accept. The Archbishop flew into a rage and smashed his favorite bone cup. He mobilized dozens of God's guards and countless soldiers to issue an SSS-level kill order. No matter what, he had to bring those 2 audacious devils back. If he was dead, he wanted to see his corpse. More importantly, he had to get back what they had taken. The God's Guardian had people who were good at tracking. They released the White Eagles, hunting hounds, and activated the surveillance cameras in the area. Finally, they locked onto the target's location in the southeast. As a result, the primordial forest became a battlefield for both sides to fight and kill. They searched the forest for 2 days. Originally, they were worried that they were searching in the wrong direction or that they had fallen into the enemy's diversionary tactic. But 2 days ago at 4 in the afternoon, they discovered the target of a black-clothed man. Both sides engaged in an intense battle. 7 God's Guardians surrounded and attacked a black-clothed man. When they seriously injured him and prepared to kill him or capture him alive, another black-clothed man shouted, "Eighth brother's tooth leak," and rushed out. While running, he fired a bullet from his pistol and took out a long sword from his waist to join the battle. The masked black-clothed man attacked ferociously. After he joined the battle, the heavily injured black-clothed man was finally able to escape. The black-clothed man fought against the 7 God's Guardians by himself. After chopping off the arm of a god general, he shouted a few words such as "cry and you will dig together," and "damn it," before looking for an opportunity to escape and disappeared without a trace. These damned East Asians. The Millennium Palace had expended so much manpower and resources to intercept the two thieves, but not only did they fail to bring them back, but one of their divine generals was also injured. That was an incomparably noble divine general, an important figure who could drink afternoon tea with the archbishop. The archbishop smashed another human head cup that he liked and began to increase the reward and punishment system. Anyone who could kill one of the black-clothed men would be promoted to a god general, regardless of their previous identity. Thus these people all went crazy. Their eyes were bloodshot. They gathered in groups and combed through the forest again and again. No matter what, they would not allow the two damned fellows to return to East Asia. Even if they did, they would kill them and kill them. This was the consequence of offending God. Despicable East Asians, they cursed in their hearts. Cha-cha-cha, another group of men in red robes jumped over the river. They were noble and reserved. Even in this uninhabited forest they maintained a good image. Northwest direction 23 degrees. Traces of broken branches found. Fresh wildflower petals fell from the Red Devil Valley. Southeast direction 11 degrees. Startled birds flew away. Using a language that outsiders could not understand, the earphones in their ears sent out all kinds of information. They were responsible for categorizing the information. We must kill the two demons who broke into the temple. This is the price of blasphemy. I must kill my way to the East Asian temple and take revenge on their fake gods. When they were far away, the river regained its tranquility. Puff, puff. A string of rapid bubbles appeared in the grass by the river. A face slowly appeared on the surface of the river like a pale corpse. Whoosh. After listening carefully for a while and finding no dangerous movements, half of his head emerged from the river. No one would have thought that at the place where the white rabbit was drinking, there was a man hiding beside the big snake. Gong Sun Chi climbed out of the river and pulled out the two blood-sucking leeches on his body. Then he looked at the wound on his left rib and frowned. He fought 7 immortal generals alone. When he avoided the joint attack of the first 2 immortal generals, his ribs were accidentally cut by the 3rd immortal general. The 3rd immortal general wanted to stab his heart, but fortunately he reacted quickly and avoided the heavy blade. Otherwise he would have been dead by now. Fortunately, Fang Yen returned and rejoined the battle, breaking their siege. If not for Fang Yen, he would have been dead by now. A few days ago he and Fang Yen met the young chief. Then they circled around the earth and hid their identities to reach the place where the gods had descended. With the help of a spy, the two of them passed through many checkpoints and arrived at the sacrificial temple of Millennium Palace. From there they stole their target. If they wanted to take the treasure, they would trigger the alarm switch of Millennium Palace. If they did not want to trigger the alarm switch, they could only not touch the treasure. It was not in line with Fang Yen and Gong Sun Chi's character to enter a treasure mountain but not get the treasure. Thus, the two of them broke the protective wall and ran away with the treasure. After that, they began to encounter a difficult and dangerous escape. The strength of the enemy was beyond Gong Sun Chi's expectations. Although they had seen a lot of information on people on the plain, in Gong Sun Chi's opinion, it was just some boasting of the Westerners. Only Wuxia's martial arts were real martial arts, and only Wuxia's martial arts were real martial arts. Then he was stabbed into this state. Gong Sun Chi took out a bottle of red potion from the depths of his clothes. He unscrewed the cap and drank half of it. Then he poured the other half on the wound. After soaking in the river, the red and swollen flesh that was about to burst open immediately began to reduce the inflammation. The wound also began to heal. With the development of modern technology, all kinds of military medicine had magical effects. If he did not use this medicine to stop the bleeding, he would have been eaten by all kinds of snakes and crocodiles when he was soaking in the river. For a martial artist of Gong Sun Chi's level, this kind of wound was not life-threatening. However, in this primitive old forest with so many people chasing after him, this wound was very fatal. He could not use too much force or too much qi. If he used too much force or qi, the wound would be torn open. At that time, blood would flow out. He would bleed all the way as he ran. Even if he did not die from bleeding, the blood that flowed out would be the best guide. It would bring a large number of immortal generals and death warriors. The sound of the grass's soft body being stepped on could be heard. Gong Sun Chi held the dagger in his hand. His body leaped high like a cheetah and stabbed in a certain direction in the forest behind him. Crush. A man in black rolled out and said in a low voice, "It's me." Gong Sun Chi stopped attacking and looked at Fang Yan in surprise. Since he separated from Fang Yan 2 days ago, he had not heard from him. He thought that he had already fled back to his country. Wasn't this what he was capable of doing? Now that it seemed that Fang Yan had returned, he could not hide the joy in his heart. Meeting an old friend in a foreign land, even if it was a familiar idiot, was something to be happy about. Chapter 740. In Gong Sun Chi's eyes, Fang Yan was indeed an idiot. You dared to challenge your own master with that small physique of yours. If I were my master, I would have slapped you to death with one palm. How could I allow you to humiliate me like this? Some people say that a brother is someone you can trust with your back on the battlefield. Gong Sun Chi and Fang Yan were not brothers, so he would not trust his back to the other. Fang Yan would take a knife for his brother, but Gong Sun Chi had 100% reason to believe that he would stab him a few times. Gong Sun Chi did not like Fang Yan, not in the past and not now. He did not like him before he boarded the plane, and he did not like him after he landed. At first he did not like him because of the great hatred between the two families. His master, the dragon god, had painstakingly defeated Mo Qingdi, the green dragon, and broke Mo Qingdi's tendons. This caused Mo Qingdi to become a cripple, and also caused the Fang family's luck to plummet. Although the dragon god had painstakingly defeated Mo Qingdi, this did not stop Gong Sun Chi from hating and viewing Fang Yan as an enemy. Because he knew that the Fang family would never forget this hatred, and they would definitely find a way to seek revenge. This was also the reason why people in ancient times liked to play the game of cutting the weeds and eliminating the roots. Later on, he did not like him because he did not like Fang Yan as a person. He felt that Fang Yan was too proud, too arrogant, and did not understand the principles of how to conduct oneself. His master was the dragon god, and it was natural for him to be proud and arrogant. Your senior brother Mo Qingdi has become a useless drunkard. What is there for you to be proud of? When you meet me, you call me brother, and when you eat, you give me a toast. Isn't this a matter of course? What he hated the most was the way Fang Yan spoke, as if every word and sentence carried a halo of mockery. If you could listen to his complete sentence and still resist the urge to cut him in half, it proved that you were very good at keeping your composure. A battle of words. He did not understand the weight of these words before. In the past, he didn't understand the weight of these words. Ever since he met Fang Yan, he deeply understood that some people were really King despicable. However, Gong Sun Chi was still very happy to see Fang Yan. This didn't mean that he started to like Fang Yan, but because he thought that if he couldn't escape, Fang Yan couldn't escape either. Fang Yan was dressed in black and had a black hat over his head. Only his facial features were exposed. This was to prevent others from spying on their true identities when they were on the move. There were many tears on his clothes, some were cut by swords, some were pierced by bullets, and most of them were torn by the thorns and branches in the forest. Their nocturnal clothes were specially made, but they could not withstand such a degree of magic damage and tearing. Phew! Fang Yan took a deep breath and pulled down the mask on his head. His face was painted black, and so were his lips and teeth. The Prince Charming of Swallow Dock looked more like a psycho than anything else. Because of the hot forest, Fang Yan was sweating profusely and his hair was wet. It was as if he had just climbed out of the river like Gong Sun Chi. Fang Yan looked at the wound under Gong Sun Chi's ribs and asked with concern, "Are you okay?" "I won't die," Gong Sun Chi replied. "It's good that you won't die." Fang Yan said happily, "One more person means one more power. Even if you can't kill people, you can help me lure some people away. You used me as bait?" Gong Sun Chi said angrily. Don't be angry, don't be angry." Fang Yan waved his hand and said, "How can I use you as bait? You are my comrade in arms, my brother. In this strange forest, the two of us can only go hand in hand and live and die together." Gong Sun Chi felt a little better. Although he didn't want to be a comrade in arms or a brother with Fang Yan, it was still in his interest to go hand in hand and live and die together. He was injured now, but he was injured. In fact, he was a burden. The fact that Fang Yan was willing to bring him along proved that this person's character wasn't so bad that it would make people's hair stand on end. "Which direction did you come from?" Gong Sun Chi asked the question that he was concerned about. "From the northwest," Fang Yan said. "I set up some traps there, then ran along the Red Devil Valley for a long time, then returned along the original path. Now they should be chasing towards the Red Devil Valley, thinking that we took that route. After all, that route is the easiest to walk to the border of Myanmar. As long as we pass the border, I don't think they would dare to bring so many people to look for us." Gong Sun Chi pointed to the small river beside him and said in a low voice, I was hiding under the tree roots by the river just now, and 3 groups of people passed by. There were god generals, god servants with heavy weapons on the periphery and their priests. I know. Fang Yan nodded and said. I waited for them to pass by before coming back to find you. How did you know I was here? I didn't know before, but I followed their search route and came back. I just happened to see you climbing out of the river. Gong Sun Chi frowned and looked up at the thick clouds that were getting lower and lower in the sky. He said, What do we do now? It's very difficult. Fang Yan's expression was also quite serious. He said, We are now being attacked from both the front and the back. The first group of people who were chasing us ran ahead of us, and they may have already set up a trap at the edge of the forest. If we want to enter Myanmar from the border, we may fall into their ambush. There are still people coming from behind, and once they find out where we are, they will be able to surround us from all directions, constantly reducing the space we can move around. In the end, there will be less and less space for us to move around, and we will still be trapped by them. Gong Sun Chi snorted and said, I know all this. Let me ask you, what should we do now? Seeing the dissatisfaction on Gong Sun Chi's face, Fang Yan thought to himself, this guy really doesn't want to admit defeat. Even now he is still arrogant. He smiled and said, You don't have to worry, no matter what, I will not leave you behind. Fang Yan's words irritated Gong Sun Chi's sensitive nerves, and a touch of deep red appeared on his pale face. He said angrily, What do you mean by you will not leave me behind no matter what? Do I need you? I can still go back without you, but you better pray for yourself. You and I don't see eye to eye, let's separate here and run for our lives. That won't do. Fang Yan said with a serious face, You are seriously injured. Without my help you will only die. My death is my own business. What does it have to do with you? In that case. Fang Yan smiled and said, You stay behind, I will go first. You, Fang Yan patted Gong Sun Chi on the shoulder and said, Take care. Fang Yan glanced at Gong Sun Chi and then quickly disappeared into the forest like a nimble rabbit. Gong Sun Chi was stunned for a long time, and the muscles on his face kept twitching. This bastard, he abandoned me just like that? Didn't we agree that we are comrades and brothers? Whoosh! Fang Yan slid down from a towering tree, covered the mouth of the divine servant at the back of the team, and used a sharp blade to cut his neck. Blood spurted out, but because Fang Yan's gloved hand covered the wound, it did not splatter everywhere. His body first stiffened and then slowly became limp. His soul was taken away by the god of death, and all the strength in his body dissipated. His legs softened and he fell down. Fang Yan dragged his body and slowly put him down on the grass. The gun in his hand fell to the ground, but Fang Yan lightly kicked it with the tip of his foot, and the gun flew into the air again. He picked it up in one go to avoid making any noise. Screech! A grasshopper in the grass was startled and jumped toward the tree trunk. Someone in the team ahead turned around. Pa! A bullet flew past the side of Fang Yan's face. Fang Yan did not stop and his body rolled toward a tree in front of him that was as thick as a person. Pa 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 pa! Rows of bullets swept over, hitting the place where Fang Yan was just standing. If Fang Yan was a little later, his body would have been smashed into a pulp by now. The target has appeared, the devil is here. Someone shouted. The soldiers immediately found cover and began to bombard the tree that Fang Yan was hiding in. The bark of the tree was smashed, the trunk was riddled with countless holes, and the weeds under the tree were charred black. However, there was no sound behind the tree, as if the target had been killed. The commander issued a ceasefire order, and all the divine servants in the bunkers immediately stopped firing. They waited quietly, waiting for news of Fang Yan's escape or his death. Unfortunately, after waiting for a long time, there was no movement behind the tree. There was a deathly silence. The commander spread his fingers and clenched them into a fist. The soldiers understood and immediately spread out, walking toward the tree step by step. A sound came from behind them. They quickly turned around, raised their guns and fired at the source of the sound. Pa 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 pa! Bullets flew and the black shadow disappeared in a flash. Another divine servant's corpse was left on the ground. That damned devil, he had somehow sneaked up behind them. The commander was furious. He raised his arm and waved it in the air. The divine servants understood the commander's intention, and they turned around and rushed toward the place where the black shadow disappeared. They fired as they ran, but did they find any trace of the target? Maybe they would be lucky and hit the devil's head or heart. Fang Yan ran through the dense forest and returned fire with his gun. Eighth brother's teeth. Fang Yan roared angrily. He felt that his Japanese was getting better and better, at least the sentence was very good. Chapter 741. Sweat and blood mixed together, turning into a pungent smell that even Fang Yan himself could not accept. This smell was strong for a long time, and it was difficult to hide from the hounds and the white eagles. All the disguises and traps that Fang Yan had set up previously were no longer effective, and the divine generals and priests who had received the request for reinforcements were gathering here on a large scale. They surrounded Fang Yan from all directions according to the satellite positioning system, and were constantly compressing the space that Fang Yan could move in. When the space became smaller and Fang Yan had no place to hide or take a detour, the only thing that awaited him was death. Or something even more terrifying and cruel than death: capture alive. The killing was intense. Fang Yan's gun had long been emptied of bullets, and he did not have a magazine that could be changed, so he could only use it as a heavy weapon and throw it out to smash people. For an expert of his level, even falling leaves and falling flowers could hurt people, let alone such a heavy metal weapon. Therefore, when he used the empty gun to smash the head of a divine servant, causing him to fall to the ground with his face covered in blood, his body had already burrowed into a dense wild banana bush. "He's a demon, kill this demon." Requesting reinforcements, he ran into the banana forest, reporting the latitude. "Everyone spread out, be careful of his sneak attacks." This small team originally had more than 20 people, but in the process of chasing Fang Yan found an opportunity to kill more than a dozen of them. They only had about 10 people now, and they were in hot pursuit waiting for reinforcements. The divine generals and priests would also know their current movements based on the satellite positioning system on them. In addition, they had to be on guard against Fang Yan's counterattack and the annihilation of the entire team. They were not afraid of death, and they had long given their lives and everything to the gods, but they did not want to die in the hands of a demon. Fang Yan used his brilliant skills and sharp killing methods to obtain their recognition, and became the demon in their words. The sky was getting darker and the air was getting thicker. They were no longer breathing fresh oxygen, but an unknown substance that was warm like burning gypsum. It was going to rain. "Let's have a rain," Fang Yan thought to himself. His body could adapt to any kind of environment, but he really didn't like this kind of suffocating work, as if he was fighting for his life in a huge wet spider web that he couldn't break free from. The banana trees were tall and dense. Large patches of leaves connected to form a barrier, blocking the vision of those who came later. The group of divine servants rushed in and found that they had lost track of Fang Yan. The commander gestured for everyone to be careful and then divided the remaining team members into 3 groups. He led one group to the center line, while the other 2 formed a fan-shaped encirclement on the left and right, heading deeper into the darkness. Swoosh! A colorful venomous snake that was more than a meter long slithered down from the top of the banana tree and pounced toward the commander who was walking at the front. It opened its sharp mouth and bit towards the commander's neck with its long and sharp fangs. Screech! A red light flashed. The commander held a gun in one hand and a tri-edge bayonet in the other. When the venomous snake pounced, he took out the bayonet and cut off the venomous snake's head. For people like them, this kind of monster really didn't have any deterrence. The snake's blood spurted out. He liked the refreshing feeling of cleanly cutting off the target's head. It would have been even better if he had cut off the heads of the 2 men in black. Just when he was praising himself in his heart, a crisis came. Fang Yan, who had disappeared without a trace, reappeared. He leaped up from the hole covered in dried leaves and crawled on the ground like a giant lizard. He stabbed the dagger in his hand at the lower 3 arteries of the divine servants. Whoosh, whoosh, whoosh. He stabbed 3 times. 3 divine servants covered their crotches and rolled on the ground. The 3 men lost the joy of being a man and were castrated by him. Pa pa pa. A dense barrage of bullets flew towards Fang Yan's body that was rolling on the ground. Fang Yan rolled on the ground twice and his body once again disappeared from their sight. "He's a damned devil." They cursed angrily. Fang Yan's speed was too fast, so fast that it was simply unbelievable. When they discovered him, he had already rushed in front of them and killed them. When they raised their guns to counterattack, he disappeared again. This was not an opponent of the same level at all. Before the arrival of the black-robed divine generals and red-robed high priests, these divine servants were just a group of pitiful cannon fodder used to restrain the enemy, Just when these divine servants shouted and wanted to chase after him, Fang Yan turned around and attacked again. Screech! He threw the dagger in his hand and stabbed it into the throat of a divine servant. The divine servant covered his throat, and before he could fall to the ground he had already flashed past him, pulled out the dagger from his throat and stabbed the chest of another divine servant. Fang Yan had to get rid of all these people. He knew that they had tracking devices on them. He didn't want them to follow him like a pack of wild dogs. Once again the battle became intense. Gong Sun Chi was lying in a hidden tree hole, his mouth quickly chewing a ripe wild banana. He didn't escape in the direction that Fang Yan had left. Instead he found a more secluded tree hole nearby to hide. Now was the time when the divine servants and divine generals of the Millennium Palace were searching for him. His physical condition wasn't very optimistic. If he encountered a situation where there were 7 against 1 again, he wouldn't be able to hold on. Of course, even if he encountered 1 or 2 divine generals, his situation wouldn't be optimistic either. However, he wouldn't admit this point. The injury under his armpit was very serious. Not only was his flesh cut, but even his bones were injured. Although he had used an effective genetic agent to heal the wound, it was only on the surface. The internal injury still couldn't be healed, and it would take a long time to recover. He couldn't use force or qi, and there were strong enemies in front of him and pursuers behind him. In such a dangerous ancient forest, there weren't many options left for him. Am I going to die? Gong Sun Chi suddenly had this thought. Tui tui tui. Gong Sun Chi hurriedly chased this inauspicious thought out of his head. How could he die? He was the disciple of the dragon god. He was a genius, wise and powerful. He hadn't reached the peak of his life yet. How could he die? Before coming out to carry out the mission, he never thought about the word death, because he felt that such a thing was very far away from him. Who could kill him in this big world? But now he had no choice but to face such a tragic and bitter problem. He could really be killed. In this strange ancient forest where there was only killing and no humanity, he had no one to rely on and was seriously injured. His only teammate. Thinking of Fang Yan, Gong Sun Chi gritted his teeth in hatred. That bastard, he abandoned his comrade just like that and ran away on his own? It's fine if I die in battle, but if I go back I'll definitely report him. Gong Sun Chi made this decision in his heart. But soon he overturned this thought. If he went back and reported that Fang Yan had heartlessly abandoned his comrade, wouldn't that be admitting to the higher-ups that he was inferior to Fang Yan and that he had to rely on Fang Yan's help during the mission to return? This wouldn't do. The proud Gong Sun Chi wouldn't accept the fact that he was inferior to Fang Yan. I'll never go out on a mission with Fang Yan again, he thought to himself. Moreover, he shouldn't have gone out on a mission with Fang Yan in the first place. The two of them were born to be mortal enemies. His master had seriously injured his senior, so he hated his master and himself. How could he help him? It was already kind of him not to hack him to death when they met just now. Could it be that he thought that he would definitely die in his current situation, so he didn't kill him? He thought that he couldn't break out of the encirclement. Since he had nothing to do here, Gong Sun Chi opened his brain and let his imagination run wild. There were some things that he had to think about and some things that he had to be on guard against. If Fang Yan really wanted to take this opportunity to silence him and avenge his senior, Gong Sun Chi really couldn't do anything to him. Fang Yan didn't need to do anything. He only needed to lure the godly generals to his hiding place. Thinking of this possibility, he quickly peeked outside the tree hole. With just a glance, he really did see 2 men in black robes walking towards him. They might have already discovered his whereabouts and were creeping towards him, trying to catch him off guard. Their black boots made no sound as they stepped on the grass. Even the most agile rabbit would make a louder sound than them. Gong Sun Chi threw away the banana peel in his hand and gripped the long sword at the side tightly. He was the disciple of the dragon god. Even if he died, he would die in battle. With this thought, he dashed out of the tree hole with his long sword and ran towards the forest on the left. When the 2 godly generals realized that their target had escaped, they didn't hide their whereabouts anymore. With a flap of their black robes, they chased after Gong Sun Chi. The 2 of them attacked from the left and right, one wielding a long sword and the other a trident, forming a perfect killing formation that was hard to defend against. Gong Sun Chi felt danger. He dashed a few steps forward and ran towards a tree that was more than a meter wide. He rushed up the tree trunk and ran straight towards the top of the tree. The black-robed godly general chased after him. The two of them continued to attack Gong Sun Chi from the left and right. When Gong Sun Chi was about to reach the top of the tree, he leaped forward. Riding on the wind on his sword, he was like an exiled immortal. Chapter 742. Blood drop by drop, dripped down. The emerald green grass beneath his feet was dyed red, and even the moist soil was once again diluted into a puddle of mud. Because he had exerted too much strength, the wound under Gong Sun Chi's right rib was pulled open again. Blood seeped out from the wound and soaked his clothes, then dripped down from the corner of his clothes to the ground. His eyes were like a wolf's as he stared at the two men in black robes in front of him. They were two tall blonde men with pale skin and deep eyes that glowed with a green light. Gong Sun Chi was a wolf, a ferocious and relentless wounded wolf that would fight to the death. They were also like wolves, greedy, noble and bloodthirsty wolves. Gong Sun Chi held the sword in his right hand. The body of the sword, called cloak, was trembling slightly, and a pool of blood flowed out from the groove of the sword, then flowed down the tip of the sword. The blood on the sword was the enemy's blood. Gong Sun Chi desperately stabbed the divine general with Neptune's trident, and paid the price of being ruthlessly slashed by the other divine general with a long saber. That saber slashed his back and he couldn't check the wound, but he could feel the flesh on his back being flipped open, and blood spurting out like a fountain. If it wasn't for his excellent dodging skills, he would have been slashed in half by that divine general. These divine servants indeed had powers that were incomprehensible to the outside world. Gong Sun Chi's legs were weak and he felt that he could fall at any time. He had used up all the strength in his body, or rather all the strength in his body had been used up along with the blood that flowed out. In these 2 days he had lost too much blood. Because of his severe injuries, every movement he made required more than 10 times the strength than before. He used his strong willpower to control his body, as well as the pride that made him feel superior at all times. He didn't want them to tremble too obviously because that would be very embarrassing for him. Yes, he was such a proud man. In the Xian department he was very proud because his master was the divine dragon. In front of Fang Yan he was very proud because his master was the divine dragon. He was equally proud in front of these divine generals of the Millennium Palace because his master was the divine dragon, the most powerful man in Wuxia. These clowns. His expression was cold, but his heart was filled with disdain for these people. If I hadn't been injured, if I had been at my peak, I would have killed all of you with a swift knife. He knew that he couldn't bear the next charge in his current condition. However, the two immortal generals were still alive. Puff. Gong Sun Chi spat out a mouthful of blood. Blood dyed his mask red, leaving a choking sour taste in his throat. He reached out, pulled off his mask and threw it away. He faced the two divine generals with his cold, handsome face. Am I going to die? Gong Sun Chi muttered to himself. He took out a black ribbon from his bosom and used it to tie the sword tightly to his right hand. Because his hands had no strength left, he was afraid that he would throw the sword out when he slashed. As long as this arm was still in his body, he hoped that the cloak sword would still be in his hands. This was the dignity of a swordsman. Master, I'm sorry. Gong Sun Chi said with a face full of guilt. You're the number one in Wuxia, but I didn't even get to learn 1/10,000th of your martial arts. I wanted to challenge the heroes of the world after I mastered the martial arts and make a name for myself. It seems like I won't have the chance to do so now. It's good too. I'll take it that you don't have a disappointing disciple like me. He thought of Fang Yan again. He really hated this guy. However, at this moment he still hoped that he could escape from this dangerous place and return safely. What an annoying guy. Gong Sun Chi thought to himself. However, I still hope that you will be able to return safely. Because only then will we be able to return the treasures we stole. And only by returning the treasures will we be able to complete our mission. Even if I die, it won't be in vain. He tied the black ribbon into a dead knot, then used his teeth to pull it hard. Tui. He spat out a mouthful of saliva, then bent his body slightly and leaned his upper body forward in a charging posture. In his current state, it was already difficult for him to defend against the encirclement of the two divine generals. As long as they charged again, he would be chopped into meat paste. However, the remaining energy in his body was just enough for him to make one more attack. An attack with no chance of survival. Even if he died, it would be because he killed the enemy first. And then get killed. Thinking about it, he still felt embarrassed. But what could he do? To Gong Sun-chi this was the most dignified way to die. Master. Gong Sun-chi thought for a while, then said in a deep voice, I can't kowtow to you anymore. He tightened his grip on the long sword in his hand, then rushed towards the two impatient divine generals. Rumble. A sudden clap of thunder tore through the sky and a majestic rain poured down. Whoosh. The curtain of rain covered the heaven and earth, as if the whole world was covered by this rain of arrows. Swoosh. Gong Sun-chi fell to the ground, panting, his whole body submerged in the muddy water. There were countless wounds on his body, and a few of them had penetrated deep into his internal organs. The muddy water is too dirty and the posture is too unsightly. Gong Sun-chi felt very uncomfortable. He really wanted to ask the two divine generals if they could help him up or change his posture. On one hand there was a language barrier, and on the other hand he was even more unwilling to ask for help. I'm going to die anyway and no one will see me when I die. He comforted himself. Kacha. The man holding the trident walked towards him step by step. Kacha, kacha. His boots stepped on the muddy water, making a piercing sound. Where is the divine weapon? He asked in a language that no one could understand. Gong Sun-chi lay there motionlessly, thinking, is this guy an idiot? If you don't speak the Wuxia language, who knows what you're saying? Hand over the divine weapon, or you'll go to hell. Gong Sun-chi closed his eyes powerlessly. He could feel the sharp weapon in the man's hand. Kacha. The man in black raised the trident high and smashed it towards Gong Sun-chi's head. Swish. A silver light flashed and the man's raised arm fell to the ground, along with the trident in his hand. The divine general holding the long blade was shocked, and rushed towards the man in black who had suddenly appeared. The man in black advanced instead of retreating, raising his sword and rushing towards him. The two brushed past each other. The man in black looked at him with a face full of unwillingness, unable to believe what had happened in front of him. Crack. The man in black's body was split into two, and the lower half of his body was still standing. Fresh blood sprayed into the air, and then it was slapped down by an even denser rain. The man with the trident looked at his arm that had been split in two, but he didn't feel any pain. He was stunned for a moment, and then the red light in his eyes blazed. Roar. Charge. His body leapt high into the air and his good arm clenched into a fist. The fist carried a strong gust of wind and countless raindrops smashed towards the man in black's head. Swish. Another silver light flashed. The divine general's other arm was also cut off. His body flew past the man in black, blood spurting out of his body. Swish, 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 swish. The man in black's body counterattacked and he chased after him, striking continuously. When he stopped moving, the divine general's body could no longer stand up. What happened? Gong Sun-chi opened his eyes. I'm still alive? Crack, crack. Someone walked towards him step by step and then stood in front of him. He wanted to look up, but he didn't even have the strength to do so. Half of his face was buried in the muddy water and he struggled to breathe. If the rain had been any heavier, his whole head would have been buried. At that time, even if the divine general of Millennium Palace didn't kill him, the rain would. Are you all right? A familiar voice sounded by his ear. Gong Sun-chi's mind shook, and his groggy consciousness became much clearer. Fang Yan? He asked aloud. He didn't speak when facing those divine generals, because he was worried that his words would expose his nationality. It's me. Fang Yan pulled down the mask on his face and looked at the motionless Gong Sun-chi and asked again, Are you all right? What do you think? Gong Sun-chi said through gritted teeth. He's already like this. Do you think I don't look like I'm fine? I think something is wrong. Fang Yan said seriously. I'll pull you up? Go ahead and pull me up. Do you think I'll refuse such a request? Thus Fang Yan reached out and pulled Gong Sun-chi out of the muddy water. He leaned his upper body against a tree, and took out some ointment from his pocket to treat him. You don't look good. Fang Yan said as he inspected the wounds on his body. Why did you come back? Gong Sun-chi stared at Fang Yan and asked. Fang Yan's arrival gave him a glimmer of hope. He knew that perhaps he wouldn't die. I hate you very much. Fang Yan said. As he spoke, he poured the potion in the bottle on the biggest wound on Gong Sun-chi's body. One bottle of potion wasn't enough and 2 bottles weren't enough either, so he took out all the potions he had. After thinking about it, he stuffed another bottle back. I also know you hate me. Fang Yan said. I do hate you. Gong Sun Chi's voice was weak, but he said stubbornly. But I still don't want you to die. Fang Yan said in a deep voice. You and your disciple owe me, I'll get it back from you. But now I can't let you be killed by these foreigners. I've said it before, we're brothers, comrades in arms. Gong Sun Chi's eyes were moist, and there was something tickling his throat, making him want to say something. You don't have to say anything, I can understand your feelings at this moment. I know what I'm doing is quite touching. Fang Yan patted his shoulder gently and said. I'm lying in the muddy water and can't move. Gong Sun Chi's voice was bitter, hidden in the sound of the wind and rain, emerging bit by bit. Don't tell anyone. Chapter 743. Lotus Flower Temple. Because the temple was not famous, it usually did not receive much incense. Except for a few faithful believers who would come to burn incense and pay respects to Buddha on Buddha's birthday, almost no one paid attention to it most of the year. However, there were a few young guests at the entrance of Lotus Flower Temple today. Big brother, it's here, I asked someone. Even if you want to become a monk, you should find a better temple. Look at this temple door, it's broken, it looks like it will fall if you push it. Third sister, what are you talking about? We are here to take Xiaoxiao back. And Ting ignored the dispute between his cousins. He looked at the Lotus Flower Temple located deep in the mountains and then stepped forward to knock on the copper lock of the wooden door. After knocking for a long time, no one answered. Is there anyone here? And Xiaojun had a bad temper. He jumped up and shouted at the temple. Are the people inside deaf? Creak. The wooden door opened and a skinny old nun looked at the few young people at the door and asked, Benefactors, are you here to burn incense? Looking for someone. And Ting was too lazy to talk to these nuns and said, We are here to find the phoenix. Benefactor, there is no phoenix in this small temple. The old nun said expressionlessly. Bullshit. And Xiaojun squeezed past the old nun and stood in the courtyard and shouted, Phoenix, phoenix, come out. The old nun was thin and weak. She was hit by an Xiaojun and almost fell to the ground. And Ting quickly reached out to support the old nun and said, Nun, we are all members of the phoenix's family. We have very important things to discuss with her. There is indeed no phoenix in this temple. The old nun said seriously. Anyone who enters my Buddhist sect has let go of the past. Now there is only a wholehearted heart to serve Buddha and a body free from the 7 emotions and 6 desires. Big brother, don't talk nonsense with this old nun. And Xiaojun was obviously a little impatient to listen to the old nun talk about Buddhism and said, Why don't we send someone to look around? How big can this broken temple be? And Xiaojun waved his hand and the 2 bodyguards behind them ran straight to the backyard. No need to look. A clear voice came. I'm here. Phoenix, who was dressed in a light gray robe, quickly walked over and stood in front of the 2 bodyguards in black. She said, This is a holy land of Buddhism. You can't make a racket here. When the 2 bodyguards in black saw the young miss appear, they naturally did not dare to break into the temple hall and the backyard where the nuns lived. This old thing still wants to lie. And Xiaojun grinned and said, We already knew you were hiding here. Sister, come back with us. Shut up, shouted the phoenix. Sis, don't be angry. And Xinyan walked to the front of Phoenix, reached out to hold her arm and said, Sister, little June has good intentions. Don't be angry with him. You've been away from home for months. Everyone's worried about you. It wasn't easy for us to find this place. We just want to bring you back. Sister, why don't you come back with us? The phoenix shook her head and said, This is my home. Where else should I go? Sister, you don't really want to be a nun, do you? And Xinyan felt that this was a very difficult thing to understand. What reason did a family like theirs have to run to become a vegetarian nun? If my heart is dead, going back will be painful. It's better to be a monk and end my life here, said the phoenix with a firm attitude. And Ting stood in the distance and looked at his sister and Xiaoxiao. He hadn't seen her for a while. Her appearance had become thinner, but her facial features were still as delicate as water. She wore a loose robe and gave off an ethereal feeling. However, her eye sockets were deep and dark. It seemed that the quality of her sleep these days was very poor. What was it that made her give up hope in life and still couldn't sleep in this pure Buddhist land? Because Ting's ability and wisdom were not enough to shoulder the heavy responsibility of the family, there were many things he didn't know. Although he had some guesses in his heart compared to the actual situation, it was still worlds apart. If he knew the truth, why would he provoke and curse Fong when he met him at the palace hotel? And Ting looked at Xiao and said softly, "Sister, come back with me." "Brother." The phoenix glanced at Ting and said, "I've already made up my mind. Don't force me, okay? Take it as the last thing I ask of you. You should know that no one will accept your decision," and Ting said in a deep voice. "The daughter of the Yin family has never become a nun. Do you know what other people think of us after this happened? Go back. If there's anything, explain it to your family. Grandpa, grandma, and the elders in the family all like you. How could they bear to let you suffer any grievances? They all like you, how could they bear to let you suffer any grievances?" Hearing this, tears were about to flow out of the phoenix's eyes. Could it be that what she had endured was still not grievance? Because of the interests of the family, she couldn't be with the boy she liked. Because of their decision, she had to act with a man she didn't like. Or was it because they were powerless when the man they deeply loved was in danger? If these weren't grievances, then what were they? Was it harm? Was it murder? Yes, they had already killed their feelings, killed their hearts, killed their hopes for the future. Killed the sunlight, the rain, the flowers, the birds, and the insects. Her world was a sheet of darkness. There are some things. Phoenix tried hard not to cry out loud. After this period of adjusting her state of mind and the power of the Buddhist scriptures, she was able to remain calm at this time. She raised her head, not letting the tears fall down from the corner of her eyes, and said, "I can't explain it clearly." Xiao. And Ting was a little angry and said, "What is it? Why can't you explain it clearly? We're all a family. If there's anything, we should bear it together. It's much better than you keeping it in your heart, right? I know, isn't it because of a man? I told you long ago that Fong Yan isn't a good person. I told you to keep your distance from him, but you didn't believe me. But it doesn't matter, you are still young. How did that sentence come about? Which woman hasn't fallen in love with a few idiots when they are young? Just treat him as an idiot who doesn't know how to cherish you." After a pause, and Ting said, "The last time we met, I already taught him a lesson for you. If you still feel suffocated, wait until we return to Yanjing. Xiaojun and I will find him for a fight. I don't believe that a poor kid from a mountain village like him can challenge our Yin family." "You went to look for Fong Yan?" The phoenix was shocked. "Since I met him, I naturally had to teach him a lesson," and Ting said confidently. "Since he dared to do it, why would he be afraid of others talking about him?" "You." Phoenix was so angry that she couldn't speak. She said, "What right do you have to find trouble with him?" Xiao. And Ting's face was pitch black and he said angrily, "How can you speak to your brother like that? Even now you are still speaking for him?" Phoenix sighed softly and said, "Forget it, you can go back." She looked at Xiaojun and Xinyuan and said, "I appreciate your kindness, but I really don't want to go back. That family can't accommodate me. Sister, just go back with us." And Xinyun grabbed Phoenix's arm, wanting to forcefully drag her back. "Xinyun." Phoenix calmly looked at Xinyun and said, "Do you want me to die?" "Sister, I can't go back." Phoenix smiled miserably. "If I go back, I will die. I will really die." And Ting left with his cousins, full of anger and unwillingness. However, when they left, they still wrote a large check to Lotus Temple, hoping that the temple could improve their living conditions. In any case, they didn't want Phoenix to suffer too much here. What they didn't know was that Phoenix's grievance wasn't in the clothing, food, and shelter, but in her heart. After sending off Ting and the others, Phoenix closed the temple door and supported the old nun to walk to the temple hall. "Master Jingwei, they were too rude. Are you okay?" "Wholeheartedly devoted to Buddha, one's saliva will dry by oneself. How can I lower myself to the level of these secular people?" The old nun smiled and waved her hand. "But do you really want to spend the rest of your life in this lotus temple?" Saying this is really disrespectful to Buddha, but this old nun still wants to say one more thing. "You are young, beautiful, and have a good family. You really don't need to walk on this road. Master Jingwei, my heart is already dead. What does other things have to do with me?" Phoenix shook her head and sighed. The old nun smiled, the wrinkles on her face stretched out like an orange peel, and said, "If my heart is really dead, how can I sigh? How can I be sad and cry when I see my loved ones?" "Master Jingwei, silly child." The old nun stroked Phoenix's head and said, People often say that nothing is more sorrowful than a dead heart. But if the heart is really dead, how can there be sorrow? And how many people can really give up the prosperity of the world, their loved ones, and become a lonely chanting sutras? Since you can't let it go, then go out. Your brother is right, everything in the world, what can't be solved? Phoenix shook her head and said, Master Jinghui, you don't need to persuade me. I won't go back. These days in Lotus Temple are the most peaceful time in my heart. Don't lie. The old nun reached out and stroked Phoenix's eyes and said, Since you came in, when have you ever had a good sleep? You have thoughts in your heart, and that's why you can't sleep at night. Your heart is not with Buddha but with that man outside. Buddha has always been here, but that man outside may not always be waiting for you in the same place. Phoenix's expression was sad and her heart was like thorns. Chapter 744. Her heart was originally as calm as still water, but the arrival of her family stirred up her mood again. Master Jinghui was right, because there was resentment and hatred. She couldn't sleep at night. If some problems weren't solved, she was afraid that those messy emotions would torment her until she went crazy. However, how could such a thing be solved? That wounded heart, that gloomy world, could it be restored to its original state? Full of grievances and strong melancholy, she returned to her room, only to find that there was another man in her room. Lotus Temple didn't have many incense offerings, so there were very few nuns here. Including Phoenix, there were only 7 people in total, each of whom could have a separate room. If you wanted, you could have 2 or even 3 rooms. The man's back was facing Phoenix. Kneeling on the futon, she chanted and prayed to every day, kneeling in front of the statue of Guanyin in the room. His body was straight, making his back particularly slender and strong. His waist was like a bee's, his long hair draped over his shoulders. Even if one couldn't see his face, one could feel that he was a handsome and affectionate man. His mouth was murmuring, his voice was hurried but indistinct. It was difficult to tell what he was saying. He was so focused that he didn't seem to notice that there was a woman watching behind him. Phoenix looked at the man's back, her body stiff and her face ashen. She wanted to retreat, but in the end she stood there without moving. Aren't you afraid that I'll kill you? The man said aloud. His voice was gentle with a husky magnetism. He was just praying to Guanyin Bodhisattva, but in the blink of an eye he asked such a cold and ruthless question. He was like a gentleman robber but also like an elegant pervert. No. The moment she heard the man's voice, Phoenix suddenly became quiet. She looked at the man and said aloud, If you kill me, all the karma will disappear at once. The body will be freed and the mind will reach the other side. Although this solution is not perfect, perhaps at that time I can really have a good sleep. Reach the other side? The man's voice was calm, but Phoenix could still hear a trace of mockery. There's no such thing as a pure land of heaven in this world. Does that world have it? If all the eminent monks were as pure as they claimed, why would they need to enjoy the incense of their believers and build their golden bodies? That world is even dirtier than the human world, right? You have hatred for this world, the Phoenix said. What about you? The man got up and turned around to look at Phoenix, who was wearing the monk's robe. How are you doing? Oh. Phoenix shook her head. I hate myself. And I can understand how you feel at this moment. The man grinned, but when he smiled he did not make any sound. It was faint and fleeting. You have 2 regrets and 2 regrets. You hate your family. You hate them for ruining your life. You hate yourself for not having the courage to change your fate. You felt guilty towards Feng Yan. You loved him deeply ever since you were young, but in the end you hurt him. You also feel guilty towards me. You don't like me, but you always use me. I couldn't bear to kill you, but they used it to kill me. Phoenix's face paled. This man really did understand her. It was much deeper than she had thought. One of her hands was still holding on to the door frame, and the hand holding the door frame cracked against the fragile door. I've let Feng Yan down and I've let you down, Phoenix said. I don't know if I've let you down more or Feng Yan down more. The more I don't understand this problem, the more I hate my family, the more I hate myself. Ever since that happened, I haven't been able to sleep well. Remorse seeps into my bones and a poisonous snake bites at my heart. The man sighed softly. Do you know why I was kneeling in front of Guanyin Bodhisattva? Phoenix shook her head. I don't know. I heard you say a long time ago that you don't worship Buddha and you don't believe in ghosts. Yes. I don't worship Buddha and I don't believe in ghosts. But maybe they really exist in this world? The man said softly. He looked into Phoenix's eyes with pity. I can understand that the family wants to take you back. Your uncles are people who care a lot about faith. How could they allow their women to become nuns? I heard the conversation between you and them. I also heard the conversation between you and that old nun. I know you haven't had a good sleep for a long time. You look very tired. I knelt in front of Buddha and recited the medicine Buddha's enlightenment mantra for you. I hope Bodhisattva can bless you with no illness or disaster, and let you have a sweet dream. Phoenix's eyes were moist. Why bother? The man grinned. If I was in a novel or a movie, I would be the #1 bad guy in the world. But bad guys also have feelings. Bad guys can also fall in love with a woman. From the first time they see her, day after day, year after year. Even if they know she likes another man, even if they know she's just playing, they're still willing to endure it. Why did you come out? Phoenix said in a choked voice. Everyone thought you were dead. I also thought you were dead. I also thought I was dead. The man squinted his eyes and laughed. But I came back to life. When I opened my eyes, even I was shocked. Baishio, go away. Go far away and don't come back. Phoenix pulled the man's arm, wanting to drive him out to a place where no one could find him. I will go. Baishio looked at Phoenix and said, I'm here to take you away. Phoenix shook her head and said, I won't go. I won't go anywhere. I live here. There are mountains, water, and Buddhist scriptures. Your attitude towards life is too negative. The man said. You should have a more colorful life. I can give you such a life. Fang Yan doesn't have such courage. Bai Xiu. The man stretched his body and chopped Phoenix's neck with his hand. Phoenix's body was already weak. She fainted immediately after receiving this blow. The man picked up Phoenix's body that was about to fall. He looked at her delicate and flawless face and said, You see, you are also very beautiful like this. With that, he pushed the door with Phoenix in his arms and wanted to leave. Put her down. A clear man's voice came. The voice was very abrupt, but it was so clear as if someone was shouting in his ear. The man's footsteps paused as he looked at the tall man standing at the corner of the lotus pond in front of the courtyard. The man sat on a big rock with a small flower in his mouth. His posture was lazy as if he had just woken up. Bai Lilu. The man said in a deep voice. His voice was still calm. The miraculous appearance of Bai Lilu did not make him feel that it was ridiculous. He was a person who had died once. What else could make him feel strange? Put it down. Buddha said to put it down. Bai Lilu was still sitting on the big rock. He plucked the small flower from his mouth and played with it in his hand. You want to stop me? Bai Xiu stared coldly at Bai Lilu and asked. Bai Xiu, you're actually not dead yet. Tiske. Bai Lilu clicked his tongue. He looked very regretful that Bai Xiu was still alive. He said, You died well. Why did you come back to life? Don't you know that what you're doing is very immoral? Life and death is a very serious matter. You're alive one moment and you're dead the next. Isn't this cheating people's feelings? After knowing that you died, the people of Swallow Dock were happy for who knows how long. Now that you're alive again, aren't we happy for nothing? Swallow Dock. Bai Xiu smiled coldly and said, One day I'll make those arrogant people pay the price. That's a bit too much. Who scolds themselves like that? Bai Lilu chuckled and said, Everyone in Swallow Dock knows that before you revealed your true nature, you were the most arrogant person in Swallow Dock. Of course, we've never treated you as a member of Swallow Dock. You're just a little bastard who mingles in Swallow Dock. Bai Xiu's eyes flashed with killing intent. He stared at Bai Lilu and asked, Did Fang Yan send you? What do you think? Bai Lilu said unhappily. I'm not interested in the little girl in your arms. I just happened to go back to do something and drank a few bowls of his wine. Then he threw me into this broken temple deep in the mountains to wait for a rabbit to come to me. I know you're very unhappy to see me, but can you understand how I feel? Bai Xiu was greatly shocked, but his face didn't show it. He asked, Fang Yan knows I'm still alive? How could he know you're still alive? He told me with certainty that he stabbed you to death with a sword. For this, he even ran to father's grave with a large barrel of wine and got drunk. Then, you think it's strange? I think it's strange too. He clearly killed you, so why did he ask me to come and protect this little girl? Bai Lilu shook his thick head and said, although I don't want to admit it, Fang Yan is indeed the smartest guy in our group. Many times I don't know what he's thinking. He asked me to come so I came. Bai Lilu looked at the phoenix in Bai Xiu's arms and said, put her down. You can leave or stay. It doesn't matter to me. You're courting death. Bai Xiu snorted coldly, his words filled with killing intent. Chapter 745. I really am courting death. Bai Lilu laughed heartily and said, I deliberately found this place to send you to your death. I can definitely help make up for what Fang Yan didn't do well. He missed, but I won't. He's too kind and only stabbed you once. If I have the chance, I'll smash your head. I don't believe you'll have a chance to come back to life that way. You're the same as Fang Yan. You like to play these boring word games. Bai Xiu disdained Bai Lilu's threat and strode towards the back of the mountain with the phoenix in his arms. Clearly he had just broken into the lotus temple from the back of the mountain. Bai Lilu still maintained a smiling expression on his face, looking like he didn't care at all. He bent the middle finger of his right hand and flicked the nameless flower in his hand in Bai Xiu's direction. Whoosh! The small flower whistled through the air, creating a fierce gust of wind. Bai Xiu tilted his head and dodged the small flower's attack. The small flower smashed into the wooden door of the room, creating a small hole in the door from the seemingly weak flower. The flower was embedded in the small hole, like a withered door regaining its vitality and blooming a fresh flower. When Bai Xiu tilted his head to dodge the flower, Bai Lilu had already jumped down from the boulder and suddenly lifted the millstone-sized boulder he was sitting on. He didn't directly use the boulder as a killing weapon. Instead, he raised the long boulder with both hands and slammed it towards Bai Xiu. He used the boulder as a handy weapon. Whoosh whoosh whoosh. Bai Lilu charged forward with the boulder. His body was submerged in the boulder, and from Bai Xiu's point of view, Bai Lilu seemed to have become one with the boulder. The boulder moved against the wind, intending to smash Bai Xiu and the phoenix in his arms with a devastating force. Bai Xiu's forward steps stopped. Just as the boulder was about to land on his head, he tapped the ground with the tip of his foot and floated backwards along with the strong wind carried by the boulder. This move was similar to Fang Yan's drunken crane riding the wind. Bai Xiu's body floated in the air like a crane and Bai Lilu's slap missed. Gotcha! The 1,000-pound boulder slammed onto the floor, creating a large pit on the moss-covered green brick floor. The 1,000-pound boulder in Bai Lilu's hand also broke into two pieces. Bai Lilu's momentum did not diminish. As his body leaped high like a rock spreading its wings, he fiercely smashed the remaining half of the boulder in his hand toward Bai Xiu in the air. Hoo hoo hoo! The boulder was as fast as lightning hurtling towards Bai Xiu in front of him. Bai Xiu sensed the danger. As he retreated, he kicked at the incoming boulder with all his might. Crack! The boulder changed direction and smashed towards Bai Xiu, who was hot on his heels. Go to hell! Bai Lilu threw a punch. Hualala! Bai Lilu punched a hole through the big rock and gravel flew everywhere. Kacha kacha! The stones floated in the air for a while before falling to the ground. It collided with the brick wall and the bluestone tiles on the ground a second time, producing a crisp sound of bones shattering. Due to the obstruction of these gravel attacks, the distance between Bai Xiu and Bai Lilu gradually increased. Bai Xiu gently landed with the unconscious phoenix in his arms. His feet stood in front of the small door of the bedroom where Phoenix lived. Clang! Bai Lilu's huge body also landed, directly causing the bluestone tiles under his feet to protrude. When he left, a pair of clear footprints would be left on the ground. It was a long story, but all of this happened in a flash. From the time Bai Lilu threw the small flower attack to the time the two landed, only a few seconds had passed. Bai Lilu grinned. The fight just now was very satisfying. It's been a long time since I've had such a good fight. Bai Lilu laughed and said, it's still satisfying to fight with you. I don't care if I kill or cripple you. I can play however I want. Fang Yan can't do it. When he fights, he's like a sissy. If he's not hiding closely, then he'll circle far away. Before I can even throw a punch, he'll already disappear. The more I fight, the more frustrated I feel. Bai Xiu really wanted to tell Bai Lilu that he had misunderstood Fang Yan. Fang Yan was not the kind of person he thought he was. Bai Xiu was a madman, but he was crazier than you. When he was determined to kill someone, he could even throw away his own life. Bai Xiu still felt a lingering fear when he thought of the battle on the top of One Sword Peak. That was a sure kill situation. What was a sure kill situation? It meant that they had to kill Fang Yan tonight. If they didn't kill him, they would be struck by lightning and cursed by the gods. In the end, they were killed. No matter how great the screenwriter was, it would be embarrassing to write such a shameless plot. Even villains have their own dignity, okay? Villains also had to maintain their dignity, okay? Now that he heard Bailey Lu say that Fang Yan was a sissy when he fought, Bai Xiu really wanted to reply with one word. Are you blind? Bailey Lu looked at Phoenix in Bai Xiu's arms and said, put the woman down. Let's have a good time first. You've been knocked down by me. You can't leave and you can't take the girl away. You've knocked me down so you can do whatever you want. Anyway, I can't stop you. Isn't this very straightforward? That's how it should be, Bai Xiu said. He looked at Bailey Lu with admiration and said, among the younger generation of Swallow Fort, you're the only guy that I don't hate. Is this a confession? Bailey Lu grinned and said, but the person I like the most is Fang Yan. He's such a cheap person. When you're with him, you either want to scold him or beat him up. It's easy to become good friends while fighting and scolding. That's a pity. Bai Xiu shook his head and said. Bai Xiu spread Phoenix's body on the floor in front of Guanyin Bodhisattva and let her head rest on a cushion so that she could sleep better. He did this very carefully and his eyes were affectionate. He looked like a newlywed husband taking care of his drunk wife. Bailey Lu sighed softly at this scene. No matter what this person's character was, at least he liked Phoenix. He thought of Fang Yan again. What about Fang Yan? Did Fang Yan like Phoenix? The person he liked was Yi Ro, and they were now boyfriend and girlfriend. And the Yi family wanted him to marry Yi Ro and become their son-in-law. It's a mess. Bailey Lu shook his head desperately. He liked to fight to his heart's content and didn't like to think about these headache-splitting complicated things. After Bai Xiu settled Phoenix down, he walked back to the entrance of the small courtyard and stood still. Fight to my heart's content. Fight to my heart's content. Although your 100 miles godly fist has improved a lot, you should know that you're no match for me. I don't know, Bailey Lu said. When it comes to fighting to the death, I won't admit defeat no matter who comes. Bai Xiu nodded and didn't say anything else. He was ready to fight. Stop. An old voice rang out. At the same time, a group of nuns trotted toward the backyard. The noise in the backyard was so loud, with loud shouts and breaking stones, that the nuns chanting in front were all alarmed. Seeing two strange men appear in the backyard, the abbot of the temple immediately shouted. Pure land of Buddhism, don't be rude. Old nun Jing Hui stared at Bai Xiu and Bailey Lu angrily. These two people actually dared to come here to fight. Did they have any respect for Buddha? Abbot, they must be here for Phoenix. Where's Phoenix? Go see how Phoenix is doing now. Because Abbot Jing Hui felt that Phoenix's 6 roots were not yet fulfilled, she refused to shave her head. Although Phoenix had been accompanying them to eat vegetarian food and serve Buddha, she was only a layman and couldn't be called a true Buddhist disciple. The nuns in Lotus Temple all liked the intelligent and beautiful Phoenix, so they had always called her by her original name. 2 middle-aged nuns shouted Phoenix as they ran toward the hut where Phoenix lived. Phoenix, Phoenix. Bai Xiu stepped forward and blocked in front of them. They moved a few steps, wanting to bypass Bai Xiu and rush into the hut. Just as they were about to do so, Bai Xiu appeared in front of them once again. Get out of the way. A middle-aged nun with hemorrhoids at the corner of her lips shouted angrily. You should know that there are no gods or Buddhas in this world. Bai Xiu looked into the nun's eyes and said, so if I attack you, no one can protect you. I've said it very clearly. Bai Xiu said expressionlessly. With a flick of his sleeve, the 2 middle-aged nuns' bodies flew into the air and fell backward as if they had suffered a heavy blow. Bailey Lu took a step forward and picked up the 2 middle-aged nuns' bodies and put them on the ground. He stared coldly at Bai Xiu and said with a face full of mockery, how mighty, not even letting 2 monks go. Monks are also human. Bai Xiu said. Anyone who makes a mistake should pay the price. This sentence sounds familiar. It's Fang Yan who said it. Bai Xiu said. When Fang Yan wanted to kill me, he said this. I think what he said is very reasonable. Clang, clang, clang. Bailey Lu walked toward Bai Xiu step by step. With every step he took, his foot that landed on the ground would leave a hole in the bluestone bricks. Anyone who makes a mistake should pay the price. Bailey Lu said in a hoarse voice. Now it's your turn to pay the price for your mistake. Bai Xiu looked at Bailey Lu's feet and raised his eyebrows slightly. This Bailey Lu, who he did not take seriously before, seemed to have grown up at an astonishing speed. Hundredly godly fists, destruction of heaven and earth. Bai Xiu said softly. I want to see how you are going to destroy this heaven and earth. Chapter 746. Bai Xiu's complexion was like jade and he was incomparably handsome. But there was a hint of violence in his eyes. He didn't look like someone easy to deal with. Bai Lu was majestic, cool and unrestrained. His every movement was natural and without any scheming, and his eyes were clear, even a little childlike. He gave people the feeling of a child who couldn't grow up. They faced each other. The battle was about to begin. Bai Lu looked at Bai Xiu with a smile and said, Teacher once said that Bai Xiu is good with the sword, better than me. I've wanted to experience your thunder sword for a long time. I didn't think I'd get the chance until today. Congratulations, Bai Xiu said calmly. Ever since he was killed by Fang Yan once, he didn't feel any joy or sorrow. His heart was as still as water. He was alive, but his heart was dead. Now he suddenly realized, what else was there in the world that was worth his longing for? Congratulations for finally having the chance to fight with you. Congratulations for finding me now. If you challenged me a long time ago, you would have died a long time ago. You think you can make me angry like this? Bai Lu laughed and said, to be honest, when it comes to verbal attacks, you're not even as good as Fang Yan. Even he can't make me angry. How can you mess up my state of mind? I didn't want to make you angry, nor did I want to mess up your state of mind. I'm just stating a fact. You've been killed by Fang Yan once. I didn't think you're still so arrogant. Do you really think there's no other talent in Swallow Dock besides you? Of course there is, Bai Xiu said. Fang Yan has the heart of Tai Chi, a rare genius in Taoism. He can be counted as one. When Ro entered Taoism from martial arts, she almost reached the heavenly Tao realm. She can also be counted as one. The others are just so I've never taken you seriously. Bai Lu laughed out loud and said, Bai Xiu, you've improved. I thought you thought I was number one in the world and the others were no match for you. After being stabbed by Fang Yan, he finally understood that there was always someone better than him. You said that Fang Yan and Yi Ro were talents of Swallow Dock, and I admit that. Also, they have fought with you before, using their true strength to conquer you. Bai Lu stomped his feet and charged towards Bai Xiu, shouting, Now let me do this. Bai Lu's body was like an angry rhinoceros. His feet were like the iron hooves of a rhinoceros. Every step he took made a big hole in the bluestone floor. There was no gravel in the hole, only powder. White mist lingered in the depths of the footprints, carrying the smell of scorched earth. Bai Lu's body was very heavy, but his punches were very light. Of course, the fist was extremely fast, reaching Bai Xiu's chest in the blink of an eye. There was no gust of wind or thunder. It looked like a casual punch, but it was also a punch that shook Bai Xiu to his core. This is, Bai Xiu thought in his heart. He had never fought with anyone from the Bailey family, but since they were both from Swallow Dock, how could he not have any understanding of the Bailey family's godly fist? The Bailey godly fist was known for its strength. Once the godly fist appeared, life and death would be seen. It would not stop until blood was shed. Their method of punching was best exemplified by the genius of the Bailey clan, Bailey Feng. Because Bailey Feng's punches were fierce and domineering, he never held back in battle. Therefore, the outside world called him Bailey Feng. He was once the most promising talent of the Bailey family to conquer Heaven's Way. Unfortunately, for some reason, Bailey Feng failed to conquer Heaven's Way and eventually committed suicide. This was a great blow to the Bailey family, but it also greatly stimulated the Bailey family's drive to strive for martial arts. Bai Xiu had already thought of a plan to use softness to overcome hardness. He was prepared to use his excellent body movement and the unpredictable thunder sword to defeat the strong enemy. However, what did Bailey Lu mean by playing this trick all of a sudden? Was this the lover's will fist? Hundreds of thoughts flashed through his mind. His right hand was already raised like a sword, and the sword slashed towards the incoming fist. Although it was a mortal palm when he waved the sword, there was a piercingly cold sword intent flowing. Bai Xiu slashed 49 times in a row, and every slash was aimed at Bailey Lu's fist. He wanted to chop Bailey Lu's fist into a ball of meat paste. The sword shadows were dense and the sword chi crisscrossed. Banging sounds rang out incessantly. Bai Xiu's sword slashed on Bailey Lu's arm, like using countless iron swords to stab a ball of cotton. No matter how Bai Xiu slashed, Bailey Lu was indifferent. He only focused on doing one simple thing, waving his fist and smashing it towards Bai Xiu's chest. Bai Xiu changed his move again. His palm flashed with green light, and when he waved there was the sound of thunder. Then, using his palm as a sword, he stabbed straight at the center of Bailey Lu's fist. The thunder sword pierces the heart. Bang! The fist and palm collided. There was a dull sound like metal and stone colliding. Kacha kacha. Bailey Lu took 2 steps back, and with each step the green stone tiles on the ground were crushed into pieces. Bai Xiu was in an even worse state. His body flew out and crashed uncontrollably into the stone wall of the house. Clang! There was a dull sound from the stone wall. His body suffered such a heavy blow and he spat out a mouthful of blood. Silence. The entire place was dead silent. The nuns watched as the 2 men flew up, watched as they fought with their lives, watched as they crushed the hard green bricks on the ground, watched as their bodies flew into the air. Do gods really exist in this world? They couldn't help but think. Remembering that this was a great disrespect to Buddha, they hurriedly threw such absurd and rude thoughts out of their minds. Bai Xiu leaned against the stone wall, his sharp eyes staring at Bailey Lu, who was sneering on the opposite side. I've said it before, now it's my turn to prove it, Bailey Lu said with a smile. How does it feel? This is not the Bailey family's fist style, Bai Xiu said in a low voice. He took out a handkerchief from his pocket and used it to wipe the blood stain at the corner of his mouth. This is the Bailey family's fist style, Bailey Lu said with a proud face. Starting from me, it will become the Bailey family's fist style. What do you mean? Because I'm the one who comprehended this fist style. Everyone knows that the Bailey family's godly fist style is the strongest, and the Bailey family members have consciously developed in that direction. Bailey Feng, the heavenly son of heaven, displayed the strongest side of the Bailey family's godly fist style to the extreme, and almost conquered the heavenly Tao. Bailey Lu's expression was regretful and he said in a low voice, but it's still not enough. No matter what, it's still not enough. Not only did he not conquer the heavenly Tao, but he also suffered from the backlash of the heavenly Tao, and finally committed suicide. This is the Bailey family's biggest loss. It was also from then on that the Bailey family realized a problem. Is the Bailey family's godly fist style on the wrong path? Or is it because we haven't fully comprehended the profound meaning of the godly fist style? We worked hard from generation to generation and improved from generation to generation. We wanted to maintain the powerful lethality of the godly fist style, but at the same time, we wanted it to be gentler and more moderate. After I became an adult at the age of 18, I rarely stayed in Swallow Dock. Every year I would go out to visit various fist masters and challenge the world's heroes. Hard work pays off. I collected the essence of fist styles in the world, and integrated them into our family's 100ly godly fist. Now you see, this is the result of my hard work. I call it reverse fist. Reverse fist? Go against the heavenly Tao, to achieve the great Tao? Bai Xiu folded the handkerchief neatly and put it back into his pocket. He walked towards Bailey Lu step by step and said, "This time I really have to congratulate you. You comprehended a new fist style and can be called a fist master. I admit you are also a talent of Swallow Dock. You are qualified to be my opponent." "I am qualified to be your opponent," Bailey Lu said with a face full of sarcasm. "I don't think so. I don't think of you as my opponent. I want to be the killer who kills you. Fang Yan is a good friend of mine and you killed his father. I have no responsibility to avenge his father. But if I can make you stay here, he won't be able to raise his head in front of me for the rest of his life, right? This favor is not so easily repaid. Thinking about it, I'm a little excited. This kind of thing is based on the fact that you can make me stay here." The corner of Bai Xiu's mouth raised slightly. Even when he despised a person, he would not be so obvious. "I'm afraid I have to disappoint you. Then eat my fist again." As Bailey Lu spoke, he once again clenched his fist and rushed towards Bai Xiu. Clang, clang, clang. The bluestone floor was once again crushed by him. The old nuns' faces were full of heartache. They had trampled the floor to such a state, and when the time came they still had to find someone to repair it. Who could they find to repair it? Bai Xiu also moved. He no longer sat and waited for death like before, but took the initiative to meet Bailey Lu. After running quickly for a few steps, he successfully borrowed the momentum and his body leaped high. Whoosh! His body spun in midair and his right palm once again blazed with green light. Bai Xiu's body spun faster and faster, so fast that his shadow could not be seen clearly, and only the burning green flame could be seen clearly. Bai Xiu, Bailey Lu suddenly pushed out his fist and roared, "Go to hell!" Bai Xiu's body descended from the sky, and then he waved his palm, and a green beam of light struck towards the top of Bailey Lu's head. Thunder sword covers the moon. Covering the sky and covering the moon, he wanted to split Bailey Lu in half with one strike. He had once used this move against Fang Yan, and although he failed in the end, this move had really caused great trouble for Fang Yan. I can't cut Fang Yan, but can't I cut Bailey Lu? Bai Xiu thought in his heart. As the two of them fought fiercely, a young man in a white robe appeared beside the nuns with a smile on his face and said, "Abbess, how about we make a bet? Who do you think will win?" Chapter 747. If a monk abstains from gambling, Buddha will blame him. The old nun Jinghui was watching the fight between Bai Xiu and Bai Lilu attentively. When she heard someone beside her asking her, she answered casually. Halfway through the question, she realized that something was wrong. The question was not asked by the nun beside her but by a man's voice. The old nun Jinghui suddenly turned around and saw a familiar man blinking at her. He looked quite cute. "It's you." The old nun Jinghui was very familiar with this man. When Phoenix just came in, he ran over and made a scene to confess his love to her. He failed to conquer Phoenix's heart, but he conquered the hearts of these nuns. All the nuns, including her, supported Phoenix and Fang Yan to be together. Unexpectedly, after not seeing him for several months, he once again appeared in Lotus Flower Temple. "Donor Fang Yan, you came at the right time." The old nun Jinghui grabbed Fang Yan's arm and said, "Help Phoenix, she may be in danger." "Don't worry, Phoenix will be fine." Fang Yan patted the back of the old nun Jinghui's hand and comforted her. "Bodhisattva will protect Phoenix's safety." But the old nun Jinghui always taught others to believe in Buddha and Bodhisattva, saying that Buddha and Bodhisattva would protect your family and make your wishes come true. But such words were just words. If they were really attacked by gangsters, it was better to ask for help from a master or call the police. Phoenix has been in the house for a long time, but she didn't come out even though there was so much noise outside. Maybe she fell asleep. Fang Yan said with a smile. "How could she fall asleep? Even if she fell asleep. Nun, I came to protect Phoenix." Fang Yan felt the old nun Jinghui's concern for Phoenix from the bottom of her heart. He said, "Don't worry. I won't let anything happen to Phoenix." Amit Ba. The old nun Jinghui chanted the name of Buddha and didn't force Fang Yan to enter the house to check. When Fang Yan and the old nun Jinghui were talking, Bai Lilu and Bai Xiu had fought for hundreds of rounds. Bailey Lu's reverse punch was indeed unique. Every time they clashed head-on, he was able to gain the upper hand. Every time the fist and palm collided, Bailey Lu would only take 2 steps back, but Bai Xiu's entire body would be sent flying. And when Bai Xiu used the thunderclap sword technique to contend with Bailey Lu suffered greatly. His body was severely injured by the palm sword. The clothes on his body were shredded by the sword chi, and he looked to be in a sorry state. Clang! Bai Lilu sent Bai Xiu's body flying with another punch. This time he took 4 steps back. He frowned, very dissatisfied with the results of this battle. Moreover, Bai Xiu was indeed a genius. In a short period of time he had already learned to dispel his defying force. Although he was still very inexperienced, he was working hard in the right direction. "I must finish the battle as soon as possible," Bailey Lu thought to himself. "Defeat him before he truly grasps the technique of dispersing force. Or even kill him." Bai Xiu's body flew in the air. Just as he was about to hit the wall, his feet kicked back and he flew forward again. Bai Xiu's body landed lightly. His eyes did not look at Bailey Lu, but at the lotus pond at the side. Fang Yan felt Bai Xiu's gaze and looked up. He waved at him and said, "Bai Xiu, I didn't think we would meet again. I thought you were already dead." The corner of Bai Xiu's mouth twitched. He sneered and said, "You thought I was dead, but you sent Bailey Lu here to wait for me? To be honest, the rabbit I sent Bailey Lu here to wait for is not you but Jiang Junling. You also know that Jiang Junling's character is even worse than yours. He is the kind of scum who can do anything. If I didn't send Bailey Lu here to protect the Phoenix, they might have thought of a way to capture the Phoenix and use her to threaten me. I am a man who values relationships very much, so I will definitely fall for your evil scheme. You guys set up a sure kill trap at Solitary Sword Peak and failed to kill me, so you must be very dissatisfied with the phoenix, right? As expected, Jiang Junling didn't come, but he sent one of his lackeys. Bai Xiu, how does it feel to be a dog? Bai Xiu tilted his head and thought for a moment. He said, it's slightly better than being a dead dog. That's true. Whether it's a dog or a dead dog, you have a lot of experience. Fang Yan looked at him with admiration. But Bai Xiu, why is it you again? Why can't it be me? I couldn't kill you last time, so you can stay this time. Fang Yan said with a smile. Putting yourself in someone else's shoes is the heart of Buddha. You should also care about my face. If I let you escape again this time, where do you think my face will be? You. Bai Xiu said in a deep voice. Fang Yan quickly waved his hand and said, I can't stop you. You have to walk 100 miles. You two continue to fight, don't stop. I'll try not to delay you. Bai Lilu stared at Fang Yan with wide eyes and said angrily, do you have a conscience? I'm fighting to help you. I know. Fang Yan nodded with a smile and said, so, that day when we were drinking in the old drunkard's courtyard, after you agreed to my request, I immediately offered you 3 big bowls of shadozi. Have you forgotten? Let's get started. Fang Yan waved his hand and looked at the nuns beside him who were watching the fight seriously and said, the nuns are getting impatient. Bai Lilu looked at Bai Xiu and said, are you very angry in your heart? Yes. Bai Xiu nodded frankly. I'm also very angry in my heart, Bai Lilu said. Then we can join forces to get rid of the person who made us angry. In your dreams, Bai Lilu said angrily. Do you think I'm an idiot? You're notorious now. Everyone can't help but cover their nose when they mention your name. I won't join forces with you. If I do, my reputation will be ruined by you. You've seen it, I've learned the inverse punch. I'm preparing to become a boxing grandmaster and leave my name in history. A gentleman doesn't stand under a collapsing wall. I can fling my sleeves and leave now. I don't care if you guys fight to the death. But as I said, I've long wanted to try your thunderclap sword. So use your full strength. Don't make me regret this trip. Bai Xiu looked at Bai Lilu calmly. After pondering for a long time, he said, all right. Clang, a dragon's roar rang out. Bai Xiu pulled out a flexible sword from his waist. The flexible sword trembled, and the tip of the sword emitted a silver-white light under the light. He didn't say a word and rushed toward Bai Lilu with the long sword in his hand. Bai Lilu let out a muffled roar. He clenched his fist and attacked Bai Xiu. Clang, clang, clang. Bai Lilu once again displayed his destructive nature. He crushed countless bricks as he ran. The smile on Fang Yan's face gradually faded. He knew that the real battle was about to begin. Bai Lilu's inverse punch versus Bai Xiu's Thunder Phoenix sword. Who would be the final winner? One was light and the other was wild. One had an invincible fist and the other had a sharp flexible sword. The collision between the two was a delightful thing to watch. Bai Lilu pushed out his glowing fist. Bai Xiu also stabbed out with the flexible sword in his hand. The tip of the sword created one sword flower after another. It was as if countless stars were lighting up around the fist. But Bai Lilu only threw that one punch, and he only had that one punch. The fist was like a rainbow. The power of the inverse punch contained in it was shocking. Boom! A muffled groan was heard. Sand and stones flew everywhere. The weeds on the ground were all broken. A strong airflow exploded. The nuns standing beside Fang Yan lost their balance and fell to the ground. Because Fang Yan used his body to block the attack of the airflow in time, the old nun Jing Hui was able to stand up straight. With her physical condition, if she were to fall down like the other nuns, she would probably lose an arm or a leg. Fang Yan turned to look at the old nun Jing Hui and asked, Nun, are you okay? I'm fine. The old nun Jing Hui ran to help the other nuns. Fang Yan didn't stop her. He turned his eyes back to the battlefield. After this blow, Bai Lilu and Bai Xiu's bodies were both blown away. Bai Lilu's body flew very far away. After landing, he rolled all the way until he rolled to the side of the lotus pond. Bai Xiu's situation was better than Bai Lilu's. He used the flexible sword as a support. The tip of the long sword pierced into the wall. He used the long sword to support his body. The flexible sword in his hand was no longer soft. Because of the infusion of true qi, It was as hard as iron. Fang Yan walked to Bai Lilu's side. One of Bai Lilu's feet had fallen into the lotus pond. Fang Yan pulled Bai Lilu up and asked, "Are you okay?" "I'm fine." Bai Lilu wiped the blood from the corner of his mouth. He stared at Bai Xiu with sharp eyes and said, "This boy has an amazing learning ability." Bai Lilu was aiming at something. This was the first time he fought with Bai Xiu. His reverse punch was a peerless fist technique that he had just comprehended, at least he thought so. Before this battle, only the core figures of the Bailey family and Fang Yan knew about it. Bai Xiu, who was still very inexperienced when dispersing the force, completely dispelled his force this time, as if he had done this countless times before. "That's why he can become master's disciple, Bai Xiu," Fang Yan said with a smile. "Hateful people naturally have their own strong points." Fang Yan patted Bai Lilu's shoulder and said, "It's good that you're okay. Get up. Let's fight side by side." "Fight side by side?" Bai Lilu's expression froze. He said, "That's not good, is it? 2 against 1? He took the initiative to say he wanted to fight 1 against 2. Fang Yan said angrily, "That's an insult to us. No one can insult us except ourselves." "He said that." Fang Yan nodded with certainty and said, "He said that. I'll attack first. You follow." Chapter 748. But Bailey Lu wanted to tell Fang Yan that it was not heroic for 2 people to fight against 1 person. He, the great hero Bailey, could not do such a thing. It was too shameful. He was a big shot who was going to become a boxing grandmaster. But he could not say it because it was not the first time he had done such a thing. He was a little annoyed. After being with Fang Yan for a long time, he could not help but have his moral bottom line dragged down to the horizon. As Fang Yan spoke, his body suddenly leaped high into the air. His body was like a cannonball flying upside down towards Bai Xiu, who was hanging on the wall. His body rolled in the air, then he slapped Bai Xiu's head. Whoosh! The shadow of the palm was like countless cloud-expelling palms, trying to seal and cover Bai Xiu. In the battle with Bailey Lu, Bai Xiu was already injured. His chest was stabbed by Fang Yan. Although the Tao addict Song Zhaniang used a precious ancient book to invite the medical addict Qin Wuxia to save him. However, Qin Wuxia was just a doctor, he was not a god. The sword mark was still there, and the injury that had affected his internal organs had not fully recovered. He was an injured person dragging his injured body to fight with Bailey Lu. In the last blow he used his vital energy, and until now he was still vomiting blood. The blood he vomited was not only from his new injuries, but also from his old injuries. The current situation was old injuries adding on to new ones, and the situation was extremely dangerous. For people like them, they could feel the chirping of insects and even the sound of flowers blooming. Naturally, he heard everything Fang Yan said. He wanted to cover the blood in his mouth and roar. "When did I say that I would fight against 2 people alone? I'm already injured like this and I still want to fight against 2 people alone. Do you think I'm an idiot? Am I insulting you, or are you insulting yourselves?" Of course, Bai Xiu could not say such words out loud. Because if he yelled and said that he did not say that, wouldn't it show that he was afraid of Fang Yan and Bailey Lu? He was indeed afraid, but he could not say such things out loud. A man needs his face, a tree needs its bark, and a puppy also wants a flowery coat. Men were very prideful. Otherwise, how could they be called men? While Bai Xiu was struggling in pain, Fang Yan's body had already flown down from the highest point. Like a shining meteor, he illuminated everyone's eyes as he flew towards Bai Xiu with an incomparably graceful and beautiful posture. Before the palm arrived, the force had already been unleashed. Bai Xiu's chest was aching from the strong wind. He could already imagine how much damage Fang Yan's firmament-expelling palm would bring to his chest. With a single palm strike, his chest would probably be smashed and caved in, right? Bai Xiu kicked the wall with the tip of his foot and his body flew backward. He pulled out the long sword in his hand from the wall. His body spun 360 degrees in the air, and the long sword in his hand danced in an airtight manner. Countless sword shadows crisscrossed and countless specks of starlight lit up. The sword shadows and starlight shrouded the direction in which Fang Yan was rushing from, imprisoning his entire body. At the same time, Bai Lilu got up from the ground and ran towards Bai Xiu's position. Behind him, rocks flew everywhere as if there was a huge explosion. When he was about to reach Bai Xiu's position, he stomped his feet and soared into the sky. Whoosh! His huge body turned into a cannonball, crashing towards Bai Xiu's figure in midair. Reverse punch. He punched out and his entire arm blazed with green light. That green light was like a burning flame spreading to his entire arm. Even the right side of his face was dyed with the green light. Bai Lilu's sleeves instantly turned into ashes, the fine powder drifting in the air. Fang Yan and Bai Lilu attacked the top and bottom respectively. The two attacked from both sides, wrapping Bai Xiu into a meat patty. Boom! Bai Lilu moved later but arrived first. He punched at Bai Xiu's lower body. Whoosh! Fang Yan's palm struck out and the surrounding air condensed, causing the entire space to distort. Crackle! This was the sound of the air burning and a burnt smell permeated the air. Bai Xiu's robe fluttered and his long hair, which was tied up by the black rope, flew in the wind. His eyes were piercingly cold and his expression was solemn. He knew that this was the most dangerous moment of his life. It was even more dangerous than when he was lying on the ground a few months ago and Fang Yan stabbed at him with his sword. The last time he was stabbed by Fang Yan. He thought he was dead but then he came back to life. However, the worst outcome would be death. If he couldn't deal with the joint attack of Fang Yan and Bai Lilu today, he might be smashed into meat paste or turned into meat paste. They wanted to dismember him. Bai Xiu had no time to think. All he could do was unleash the full power of the thunderclap sword. As he thought this, the sky full of sword shadows turned into a single sword, and the sky full of starlight suddenly extinguished and disappeared. All that was left was that sword, that plain and ordinary sword. Even the old nuns at the side felt a little down in their hearts when they saw the beautiful flowers turn into such a plain and ordinary scene. It was like a drama had just entered its climax and everyone was waiting for it to explode, but the actors had already begun to wrap up. The thunderclap sword's thunderclap sword. This was a sword of life and death, and it was also a sword that Bai Xiu comprehended after his resurrection. He broke through his own shackles and became a true master of the sword. With this sword alone he could be ranked as a grandmaster. Like heavenly sword Lu Kanyang 100 years ago, he was a swordsman who understood the sword the best. Bai Xiu understood the sword. Swords were swords and people were swords. People could get angry and so could swords. People's personalities were different, so they would show different attitudes. Swords were the same. When you were happy, the sword you swung was happy. When you were sad, the sword you swung was sad. When your life is in danger, your sword will also feel threatened. If your heart started to feel fear, then your sword would be the first to feel fear and you wouldn't even be able to control it. Fang Yan was as despicable as one. Bai Xiu was as one with the sword. As expected of the two most outstanding young geniuses of Swallow Fort. That ordinary-looking sword was no longer a sword but Bai Xiu. It was very similar to Bai Xiu, silent, low-key yet arrogant. The pride in its bones couldn't be hidden. That sword pierced through the qi, the cage, and the omnipresent space. That sword pierced straight into Fang Yan's chest, the place where his heart was. That was also the place where Fang Yan stabbed to kill him. Blood for blood, a tooth for a tooth. Bai Xiu coldly shouted. Fang Yan, you owe me this. This was Bai Xiu's pride. This was also the sword's pride. Bai Xiu's sword pierced straight at Fang Yan and he only had his eyes on Fang Yan. He knew better than anyone else that it was impossible for him to kill Fang Yan and Bai Lilu, who were experts who were not weaker than him, with a single stab, unless the two of them stood side by side and let him skewer them like skewers. He ignored Bai Lilu, which didn't get Bai Lilu's gratitude, but made him hate Bai Xiu even more. Am I so much worse than Fang Yan? As he was thinking about this, Bai Lilu exerted all of his strength. One sword, one punch, one palm. 3 different ways of attack, 3 different kinds of qi flow. They hadn't collided yet, but the sword, fist and palm wrapped in vital qi had already started fighting fiercely. The starlight in the sky rose again then disappeared. Everything returned to peace. Bai Lilu's body was thrown out and he fell into the lotus pond with a plop. Bai Lilu's body lay straight on the lotus pond as if he was dead. 2 middle-aged nuns ran over to take a look, and hurriedly went into the water to salvage Bai Lilu. Although they were extremely afraid, monks were compassionate. If the person was not dead and they didn't care, Buddha would blame them, and there would be trouble at the police station. I'm not dead. Bai Lilu suddenly opened his eyes, glanced at the 2 nuns and said aloud. The 2 nuns were so scared that they kept retreating and one fell into the pond. It seemed that the Bai Lilu who was not dead was more terrifying than the dead Bai Lilu. But I'm seriously injured, Bai Lilu said. very seriously. Maybe I'll really die. The two nuns looked at each other and walked over together. Each of them grabbed one of Bai Lilu's arms, trying to drag him out of the water first. Fang Yan retreated to the group of nuns. There was a wound on his chest, a wound that touched his flesh. The opened flesh was oozing blood, gurgling out, and it flowed rapidly. Bai Xiu disappeared. The other nuns were panic-stricken. Only the old nun Jinghui and another older nun ran to Fang Yan with a worried face and said, "Benefactor Fang Yan, are you okay? Oh, you're seriously injured. Thank you, nun. This, I know very well." Fang Yan smiled and thanked her. After all, Bai Xiu's sword had cut his body. No one knew better than him how serious the injury was. Should we call the police? Thank you, nun, I'm fine. Fang Yan was still able to maintain a kind smile to the old nun and said, "There's no need to call the police. When the police arrive, the bad guy will be dead and they can only take the good guy away. Only the thieves of Swallow Dock can do such a shameless thing." An old voice came from the sky. Everyone looked up and saw a man in a black robe appear on the roof. Bai Xiu, who had disappeared, was held in his arms. Bai Xiu had fainted and his face and body were covered with blood. Chapter 749. The man on the roof was completely shrouded in a black robe and a black hat on his head, covering half of his face. Obviously, he didn't like to show his true face in front of others. One of his hands was pressed against Bai Xiu's chest, and a cloud of white mist rose. It seemed that he was using his true power to guide the stagnant and broken airflow in Bai Xiu's body, guiding it into Bai Xiu's sea of qi in order to maintain his vitality. Bai Lilu was trying hard to climb out of the lotus pond. When he heard the black-robed man's accusation, his face turned red, and then he retorted angrily saying, "Bai Xiu was the one who challenged us. Who can you blame?" The black-robed man didn't care about Bai Lilu at all. He didn't care about people like Bai Lilu. His eyes were fixed on Fang Yan, who was treating the wound, and his voice carried a hint of sarcasm. "Fang Yan, we meet again. Xianxia, you old man." Fang Yan gritted his teeth and scolded. While scolding, his hands didn't stay idle. He took out a bottle of red potion from his pocket, which was a good thing that only the Xian department could get. He quickly poured the potion on the open flesh, and the blood that oozed out immediately froze. He then took out a larger bottle and sprayed it on the wound. The mist-like substance covered the open flesh. Other than the bone-chilling cold, even the pain of the flesh tearing had disappeared. The newcomer was the Tao addict Xianxia. Fang Yan remembered his voice. Even if he were to cremate himself, Fang Yan would know that the pile of ashes belonged to him. If he did not believe it, Fang Yan would let him try if he agreed. Just now, when Fang Yan and Bai Lilu attacked Bai Xiu, they wanted to completely eradicate Bai Xiu in one blow. As long as Bai Xiu was not dead, revenge would not stop. Only when Bai Xiu was completely dead could Fang Yan really give up on this enemy. Otherwise, he would still find ways to get rid of him. Bai Xiu was a thoroughly bad person. Moreover, he was a bad person with extraordinary skills and intelligence. Hooligans weren't scary. What was scary was a cultured hooligan. In Fang Yan's eyes, Bai Xiu was a cultured hooligan. He killed his own father, and for a long time, no one even knew that he was the murderer. He was as calm as usual, living his life in Swallow Dock as usual. Reading books, practicing swordsmanship, and nodding to everyone he met, but he did not get close to them or stay away from them. From this, it could be seen how firm and cold his temperament was. Now his target was the phoenix. If Fang Yan hadn't asked Bai Lilu to come and help guard in advance, he would have succeeded this time. The phoenix had fallen into Bai Xiu's hands. If they used the phoenix to force him to do something that went against Fang Yan's conscience or his own heart, how should he deal with it? Bai Xiu must die and the Tao addict must be punished. Just when Fang Yan and Bai Lilu were ready to join hands to kill Bai Xiu, in case something unexpected happened, Tao addict Song transplanting rice appeared again. He suddenly took action and pulled Bai Xiu out of the encirclement at the critical moment. Tao addict Song transplanting rice blocked the real killing moves of Fang Yan and Bai Lilu, so Bai Xiu had to bear less. "Ah, Fang Yan, in this world, only you dare to scold me like this. Don't flatter yourself." Fang Yan sneered and said, "There are many people who scold you, but you don't know it. Not only do I dare to scold you, but I also dare to kill you." "Fang Yan, you are so naive." Tao addict was not angry with Fang Yan's words. she said. Do you think you and the good-for-nothing who climbed out of the pool can kill me? Isn't that enough? Fang Yan asked with a smile. Of course not. Song Transplanting Rice said rudely. If it weren't for the two old guys who desperately protected you at Sword Peak, I would have killed you with my palm. How could you have the chance to talk nonsense now? Fang Yan laughed and said, It's so childish to say that. Before they came I took so many slaps from you but I didn't see you kill me. Later my two masters came. You couldn't beat them so you put the blame on them. You wanted to protect Bai Xiu but I stabbed you with my sword. But that bastard is so tough that I didn't kill him with my sword. I won't make such a mistake again. Speaking of this, Song Transplanting Rice's anger rose again. Fang Yan tricked them and stabbed his sword into Bai Xiu's chest. At that time they really thought that Bai Xiu was dead. After the two old guys took the unconscious Fang Yan and the seriously injured Phoenix away, they also left Sword Mountain with Bai Xiu's corpse. Song Transplanting Rice touched Bai Xiu's body and felt that his heart was still beating weakly. Song Transplanting Rice immediately used the genuine qi in his body to protect his heart, and then asked someone to exchange the Tao ancestors' handwritten cure illness technique for the treatment of Wuxia, the medical addict. In order to exchange for Bai Xiu, he had lost one of his favorite treasures. It was the only one in the world. The medical addict had coveted it for a long time, and finally had to give it to him as a consultation fee. Until now he still felt his heart bleeding. If it weren't for Fang Yan, the cure illness technique would still be in his personal treasure house. Fang Yan, do you know? You will never be a match for Bai Xiu. You will always be defeated by him. Song Transplanting Rice knew how to provoke Fang Yan and how to make him suffer. He killed your father but you can only look for the murderer like a fool. You can't kill him but he wants to kill you. Fang Yan pointed to Bai Xiu in Song Transplanting Rice's arms and said, He can't kill anyone like this, right? Why do you think I came? Song Transplanting Rice laughed sinisterly. What do you think I'm doing here? Could it be that this is a trap? Fang Yan exclaimed. Bai Xiu knows that you are a playboy. Although there are many excellent women around you, you can't let go of Phoenix. Song Transplanting Rice explained with a smile. He was willing to do such a thing. It was refreshing to kill the prey with one strike, but it was even more interesting to watch the prey struggle in remorse. So he came to find Phoenix. His purpose was to lure you out. The original plan was to take Phoenix away and force you to the place we agreed on. I was a little worried so I came to take a look. I didn't expect to meet you here. Well, if you don't care about the feng shui, I'll finish you here. It'll save me the trouble of walking through the high mountains. So your target is me. Fang Yan said with a sigh. What do you think? Bai Xiu was indeed infatuated, but he was also a smart man. He knew how to choose between a woman and life and death. He was dead in the past and now he was a heartless Bai Xiu. Would a heartless Bai Xiu still care about a woman's feelings? The mantis stalks the cicada, unaware of the oriole behind. I'm sure you're familiar with the saying, I know your family has a long history of learning, right? I see. Fang Yan said with a smile. Bai Xiu kidnapped Phoenix to lure me to the place where you were lying in ambush. In the end, Bai Xiu's kidnapping didn't work because I had already arranged for people to ambush him here. When we were about to kill Bai Xiu, you ran out and ruined our plans. You even threatened to kill me. Do you think that I don't have a backup plan just because you have a backup plan? Huh. Song Transplanting Rice said sarcastically, If the monk and the Taoist don't come to save you, I'd like to see who can stop me this time. You have a plan to kill me but I have you in Ro. Fang Yan said with a smile. He shouted to the house, Ro Ro, come out. Come and see how disgusting and ugly the world-famous Tao addict Song Transplanting Rice is. Creak. The wooden door of the hut where Phoenix lived opened, and Yi Wen-ro, dressed in black, stood at the door. She held a woman in her arms. It was Phoenix, who had been knocked out by Bai Xiu and put on the futon in the room. Yi Wen-ro walked towards Fang Yan with Phoenix in her arms, and then handed Phoenix over to the nuns around Fang Yan. Old nun Jing Hui was anxious. She grabbed Phoenix's arm and shouted, Phoenix, 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 how are you? Although Phoenix did not enter Buddhism, she had a very good relationship with these nuns. They all treated her as their own niece. She will be fine. Yi Wen-ro explained softly, she was just knocked out. She will wake up after a sleep. Yi Wen-ro glanced at Fang Yan and said, I think it's up to you to decide whether to wake her up or not. Fang Yan nodded and sighed softly. Yi Wenrou's approach was right, and it was entirely for his own sake. If Phoenix woke up and faced such a situation again, how would she feel? Even he did not know what kind of mood he should use to face Phoenix. Besides, what if Yi Wenrou is jealous? Song transplanting seedlings had obviously heard of Yi Wenrou. When he saw Yi Wen coming out of the room, he couldn't help laughing. His voice was like a goshawk or an old dog. He said in a deep voice, "Fang Yan, is this the move you prepared for me? Are you going to let your woman intercept me and kill you? I'm afraid you want to drag her to death with you." Tao Addict is famous and her cultivation is unfathomable. She is no longer limited to the 7 addicts. Even Ho Zhendong, the martial addict, is no match for you. So we're going to attack you together. Do you dare to take it? What's there to be afraid of? Tao Addict Song transplanting seedlings said heroically, even if there are 100 of Yi Wenrou, let alone one. Do you really think a woman who failed to conquer the way of heaven can help you kill me? I would like to ask with concern, how much of her internal strength has she recovered from the backlash of the power of the way of heaven? How much of her internal injury has she recovered? You even know this? Fang Yan asked with his eyes wide open. The world is so big. What can be hidden from my eyes? Chapter 750. Above the mountain peak in the dense forest. From this angle one could see the Lotus Temple at the foot of the mountain. The lonely mountain temple was just a small and dilapidated courtyard through the binoculars. A man in a black suit looked around with a pair of binoculars, with a contemptuous and arrogant smile on his face. The mantis stalks the cicada, unaware of the oriole behind. The most ridiculous thing about this sentence is that everyone thinks they are the oriole. But who is the mantis? Who is the cicada? The man said in a clear voice. If there were no mantis and cicada, how could the oriole behind covet? Young master, they are all mantis, only you are the oriole hidden in the back. A tall man said with a flattering face. The man turned around with the binoculars, and the big man's pig head suddenly pulled in front of him. He said with a smile, before the overall situation is settled, this kind of words don't count. In the Battle of One Sword Peak, we have already determined that we are the oriole, but what happened? Didn't we still fail? Failed miserably? Now the name Jiang Junling has become the biggest joke in Yanjing. What's there to be proud of? That was just an exception. The big man still said with some reluctance. Who knew so many things would happen later? Who knew that the old monk and the old Taoist would stand up to help him? If it weren't for those monks, we would have killed Fang Yan long ago. As the big man spoke, his face became pale and he hurriedly explained, I don't have a problem with the monks. I respect the Tao Addict very much. The man in the suit smiled and shook his head. He threw the binoculars in his hand to the bodyguard next to him and said, how many people in this world can be free from the world of mortals? Monks are human beings, Taoist priests are also human beings. People have desires, and when their desires can't be satisfied, they can do anything. Although the big man didn't understand what the young master was saying since he said so, it must be very reasonable. The man in the suit looked at a waterfall between the mountain streams on the left and said, the water is too small. It would be good if the water was larger. Everyone was shocked. A long-haired old man asked in a deep voice, young master, do you mean to flood the Lotus Temple? How could he do such a thing? The man shook his head with a smile and said, Master is down there. How could I put him in danger? Besides, with Master's help, Fang Yan's head will definitely fall to the ground. I hate Fang Yan, but Master hates Fang Yan even more. I'm sure he won't show any mercy. Eldest young master is right. The long-haired old man nodded and said, Mr. Tao Addict's kung fu is profound. I'm afraid his cultivation is no less than that of the 3 dragons. Some busybodies have listed him as one of the 7 addicts. That's not to show respect for him, but to limit the growth of his reputation. It was said that Fang Yan, who possessed the heart of Supreme Ultimate, was a rare genius of the Tao sect. If Fang Yan was compared with the Tao Addict of the same period, he was just a clown. Unfortunately, the people of Taoism are jealous and narrow-minded. They are unwilling to let Mr. Tao Addict inherit the throne and control the Tai Chi diagram. Otherwise, Mr. Tao Addict would have been the master of Taoism long ago. Master is indeed a genius. There's no doubt about that. But Fang Yan does have some skills. Only by admitting the strength of the opponent can he really knock him down. Everyone nodded and deeply agreed. The man in the suit looked at the waterfall not far away. There were red flames burning in his eyes. The water is still a little small, he thought in his heart. Fang Yan didn't like arrogant people. He thought he was the best man in the world. But there was someone who came to him to brag. It proved that the other party was blind and didn't know his place. The world is so big. What can be hidden from my eyes? Fang Yan was very unhappy after hearing this. The world is so big. What can be hidden from your eyes? Wan Qian flirted with a girl in Yanjing. Do you know how big that woman's chest is? Zhu Xian peed into the North Sea. Do you know how long his dick is? Forget it. I won't use Qin Etian as an example. Fang Yan felt that these monks and Taoists liked to brag the most. They talked all day long as if he and Guanyin Bodhisattva and Buddha were good brothers. Come on, they don't even know who you are, okay? Fang Yan felt that he and the heavenly primogenitor were good brothers. Otherwise, how could he be so talented when he was born? Fang Yan looked at Tao addict Song transplanting coldly and said, since you agree, then let's get started. When Rowan and I are both younger than you, the food we eat is not even as much as the salt you eat. So outsiders can't say that we bully you. Song transplanting was stunned for a long time. He didn't feel that this guy was praising him. Fang Yan looked at Yiwen Rowan and said, what do you want to say? Yiwen Rowan looked at Fang Yan doubtfully and asked, what do I need to say? Before a fight you always have to say a few harsh words. For example, I want to poke your eyes blind, I want to crush your balls, I want to tear your body into pieces. Yiwen Rowan thought for a moment and said awkwardly, kill him. Fang Yan was a little angry. He felt that Yiwen Rowan's harsh words were not harsh at all. Ignorant boy. Tao addict Song transplanting put Bai Xiu's body against the ridge of the roof. Without any movement, his body had already floated down and stood in front of Fang Yan. If you want to fight, then fight. Don't waste our time. Fang Yan nodded and looked at Yiwen Rowan. You attack, I'll sneak attack. Song transplanting thought that if this guy was his boyfriend he would definitely crush him. He was not his boyfriend. Unexpectedly Yiwen Rowan nodded and said, you don't have to fight. You don't have to fight. Tao addict Song transplanting was angry again. You don't have to fight? What do you mean? Do you think you can take me down by yourself? Arrogant bitch. Tao addict roared. She leaped up and hit Yiwen Rowan's head with her palm. Yiwen disappeared on the spot. Tao addict Song transplanting's eyes were wide open, but he knew very well that he did not open his eyes at all. However, he had lost the target in front of him. He was shocked. When he was about to turn around and change his move, a cold wind appeared behind him. Bang! He was hit on the back and his body staggered toward the stone wall of the house. Fortunately, the walls of the houses in Lotus Flower Temple were made of big stones. Otherwise, they would have been broken by Tao addict Song transplanting and Bai Xiu. Puff! The Tao addict Song Zaniang spat out a mouthful of blood from the corner of his mouth. He looked at Yiwen, who was standing in the same place as if she had never moved, with a ferocious expression. He asked in a hoarse voice, what's going on? Natural Tao realm? Yiwen looked at him calmly and said, natural Tao state. You have entered the natural Tao state? Tao addict Song transplanting's mind was racing, imagining all the processes that had developed to the present. Yiwen had entered the natural Tao state. He did not fail but deliberately concealed it. What was their purpose? He wanted to use Phoenix as a chess piece to lure Fang Yan out to snipe him, but accidentally encountered a natural Tao state expert here. I understand. I understand. Tao addict Song transplanting's mouth was dripping with blood and he said in a cold voice, you deliberately concealed the news so that I would not be wary of you. I thought that even if you joined forces you would not be my match. Then you came here. Yiwen's performance was too calm, which made Fang Yan very dissatisfied. Come on, you are a natural Tao state expert. After keeping it a secret for so long, now you finally have the opportunity to announce this shocking news. How can you not be, not happy at all? Fang Yan was very happy. He looked at Song transplanting with a smile and said, didn't you just say that nothing can be hidden from your eyes in this big world? I thought you already knew about this matter. You were so surprised just now. So there are things in this world that you don't know? Puff. Tao addict Song transplanting spat out blood again. He did not know whether it was caused by Yi Wen's palm injury, or because Fang Yan used his own words to counterattack. "Don't be angry, it's not worth it." Fang Yan comforted him. "You're about to die anyway." She clearly failed. Why did she succeed? Song Transplanting asked. Everyone knows she failed. Even the Yi family said so. "It was a failure," Fang Yan said with a chuckle. "But then she succeeded again. Behind every successful woman, there is a man who is willing to sacrifice for her selflessly." Yuan was deeply in love with Fang Yan. So when she tried to climb to the natural Tao state, the test Heavenly Tao gave her was to sever her emotions. Yuan couldn't do it. She couldn't let go of her feelings for Fang Yan, so she suffered a backlash from Heavenly Tao. Her body was surging. The energy that she had mobilized to break through the door of Heavenly Tao had nowhere to vent. Finally, it ran wild in her body, but it couldn't find a way out. Yuan was unconscious. Her body temperature was rising. Her sea of energy formed a volcano. The volcano was getting hotter and hotter, and it was about to explode. At the critical moment, Fang Yan rushed in. He didn't know how to vent his anger, so he could only use the power of Tai Chi to move the volcano into his body. Fang Yan almost died. Until now, his heart of Tai Chi was still motionless, forming a dead fetus. In order to survive, Yi Wen was freed from the shackles of Heavenly Tao and became a Heavenly Tao state expert. You're tuning in to the Zhou Xian's Legacy YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.